Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Studios. Ian is here today. Hello, Ian.
What up, what up?
Boy, I tell you, Titans media getting after each other at the coordinator press conference. Who thought the throwdown was going to be today? I mean, my goodness.
A little heated.
Can we not just ask questions in peace? I mean, my goodness. We'll get to that at some point today. And we will get to the the coordinator press conferences. I really, when it comes to the offensive guy, Nick Holes, I mean, I hate to say it, but I don't, the offensive coordinator is Brian Callahan. The quarterback's coach is Brian Callahan. The play caller is Brian Callahan. Everything with the offense to me is Brian Callahan. Now, Denard Wilson, the defensive coach, I liked what I heard, so we'll get into that. Chris Sanders will join us later this hour. But let's start on the Predators today, because last night was a freaking gut punch. So I've been really trying to think all day about how to correctly articulate my feelings on the Predators and the Predators season. I went into it with a little bit of optimism and kind of an expectation that this team would make the playoffs. Last year they were right there on the doorstep of making the playoffs. They did not have a roster, and I don't think they have a roster now, but they did not have a roster to be able to compete in the playoffs. But they were right on the doorstep with a coach that I didn't think was very good, who, by the way, check the standings, Minnesota's not doing so hot. So I figured with a new coach who was a good coach and kind of the renewed energy and the addition of Ryan O'Reilly and things like that, I kind of just figured that the Predators were going to have a better season. I mean, I really thought that there was a pretty good chance that the Predators were going to have a season that was going to be 20% better maybe than last season. At least that was my hope. And so that was my hope. That was my expectation. Early in the year, it didn't look like it. Then I got off the bandwagon. Then they started winning all these games in a row. And I got back on the bandwagon. And now it's just kind of win one, lose one, win one, lose one. But the overall theme is obvious. They don't have enough offense. That's what happened last night. That's what happened on the last road trip. They went to Edmonton. They played tough. They just can't score with a team like Edmonton. They just can't score with a team like Jersey last night. I mean, they tried, and it was close, and the disallowed goal I thought was a legitimate goal last night. But they got outshot 47-32. In a game that otherwise was completely even across the board. I mean, completely even. And so when it comes to the Predators and their season, I just kind of feel like, where we are and where this season is going. And it's probably, we're not there yet where they have to decide, where they have to throw anything down and say, okay, they're for sure sellers. But it feels like that's where this is all headed. And again, when it comes to the Preds, I want a good season. I want an entertaining season. All I have asked for when it comes to the Predators is one competitive playoff series. That's it. That's all I want is a one competitive playoff series. And it doesn't look like they're going to be able to get it. Last night, they're 2 points out of a playoff spot. Last night, they were so close to winning that game and being tied for a playoff spot and everything else, and they fell flat. And Barry Trotz on the show yesterday, I asked him, I said, what has to happen for you guys to not be sellers? And here's what Barry said.
Our team's going to give you every ounce of what they have. And if they give us every ounce and they can do it, then we're buyers. We'll go in and get something. We can fix some things, I think, internally. Some other things we may have to go get. But if they give you every ounce and they can't do it, you have to be realistic and not try to force it. And so we could be sellers. But I don't know that yet. I think these are great tests for us.
Look, they gave it everything they had last night. Jersey is a middle-of-the-road team. They're trying to make the playoffs. They have good players. They just don't have any goaltending. They're trying to make the playoffs. They're not a cup contender. They're not going to be a cup contender. They were playing at Bridgestone Arena last night, which apparently has not been all that kind to the Predators. And you're dead even with them in every statistical category, except they got 47 shots on net. You got 32. So they still have time to right the ship Because, again, they could go bananas on this upcoming road trip. And if they do go bananas on this upcoming road trip, which really starts tomorrow at home against Dallas, but if they go crazy and they beat Dallas and St. Louis and Vegas and all of a sudden they go out west and they get hot, then they will have proven to all of us, like Barry said right there, that maybe they should be buyers. It's just not very likely at this point. At this point, I think it's fair to say the Predators are what they are, which is they're a very tough team. They are really led by their first line offensively. It's the only line they have that can score. If they get on the power play, they've got a shot. Defensively, they're fine. For the most part, they have good goaltending, but they're never going to be able to score enough to win a playoff series. And at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. And so when it comes to what I truly wanted this year, I mean, and honestly, again, I don't want to say like, oh no, I definitely expected this out of the Predators, but I did kind of expect it out of the Predators a little bit. I wanted one competitive playoff series. That was all I asked for. You know, give us the excitement of a playoff chase. And then after the playoff chase, give us the excitement of one competitive series where games 1 and 2 in Vegas are so tough and so to the wire. And so then they come back here and give me what they did a couple years ago against Carolina. But I don't think they're going to be able to do that. They just don't have the offense. And again, there are frustrations that I have about the fact that they don't have the offense, hoping that some of these young players were going to pop and hoping that, you know, again, one or two of these guys were going to establish themselves as a legitimate top 6 forward. But as Barry said, you got to be realistic. And when it comes to being realistic about the Predators, it is that they are pretty much what they were last year. They got young guys who are sometimes fun to watch, who show signs of potential of being NHL players. They don't give it to you enough, but they show those signs, and they consistently get good goaltending from both Saros and Lankinen. And last year's team, as we begged and we yelled and we cried, we begged last year's team to sell at the trade deadline. We were all scared to death that David Poile wasn't going to do it because David Poile, for the longest time, could not accept reality that even though this team might be able to make the playoffs, they weren't going to do anything in the playoffs. Finally, David Poile looked at it last year and said, okay, I give up. This isn't going to work. Let's sell. And that began the process. Well, we have to be able to give us an exciting April, which is, again, what this is all about. Will they get there? I don't know. I think Barry Trotz has a good plan. I think the high-end offensive players that I really, really want to see, I think they might be a little further on down the road. Now, maybe the Kimmel kid is up at the end of this year, and he's a first-line guy next year, second-line guy next year. Maybe he's like Tomasino and Evangelista and Cody Glass and gives you a little bit here, but not a lot there. I don't know. But, again, where they sit right now, they're not going to develop the offense in the next 3 weeks to be able to prove to us that they could go win a playoff series against Vegas or Colorado or Dallas or Edmonton or these high-flying Western Conference teams that have great forward play. And Juuse Saros can steal games left and right. It's not going to matter because if you can't score yourself, he can go out there and give you 43 saves, and it's not going to matter. So this doesn't mean that even if they are sellers that they still can't find a way to squeak into the playoffs because last year they almost did. I mean, they almost snuck right in even after kind of blowing it up right around this time of the year. You know, they waved their flag. They traded Nino Niederreiter. They traded Matthias Ekholm. They traded Mikhail Granlund. They traded all those guys last year. Tanner Jeannot. Boy, what a trade was that. Holy crap. But they made all those moves, and they still almost made the playoffs last year. So even if they commit to selling, and that includes the goalie, they'll still have a shot to make the playoffs. I mean, they're still going to try to win. But again, as far as getting our hopes up and expecting them to make the playoffs and expecting a wild, intense stretch down the, end of March, right into the middle of April, expecting them to make the playoffs, expecting them to be able to compete in the Western Conference. They're not there yet. They just don't have the offense for it. And I think last night was a microcosm of their flaws and a reality check of who they are, which is they can gut you. Like they can grind and gut and everything else to keep a game with decent high-end forwards, which is what New Jersey has, decent high-end forwards. Like they can grind that game to where it's a missed call here that cost them. But they really weren't competing at the same level New Jersey was last night. And that's because they're just not good enough. They got one line that can do that. It's the first line. Even yesterday, I told Barry Trotz when he was on the show, I said, as a fan, when they're down a goal and I see guys on the ice, I'm like, all right, let's get Forsberg and O'Reilly back out there on the ice because they're the only guys that can score. And last night I was at the game and I was sitting by Chase and I was at the game with about maybe 3 minutes to go and Cole Smith is out there on the ice. I'm like, why is Cole Smith out on the ice with 3 minutes to go in a game that's a one-goal game? And the answer is because they don't have anybody else. So last night's loss was a gut punch. And the thing about the Predators is when I'm there and they've got a lead in the second period or it's a tie game in the third period or I look at a game like last night and I'm like, oh, that was a chance to steal 2 points. And then I say to myself, the frustration that I walked away from that game with was the idea that they didn't steal 2 points at home against an average New Jersey team, and your goalie saved 43 of 46 shots. Yeah, you might just not be very good. And that's where we are with the Preds. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. If you've got a thought, 615-737-1025. That doesn't mean that the Predators have to today sit back and say, okay, trade everybody, because we got 3 weeks to go until the deadline. But I think it's pretty obvious what direction they need to look. And Barry said yesterday, got to be realistic. 615-737-1025. Now, the goalie. What Barry said about the goalie on the show yesterday, I thought was very revealing. But I also have my reservations about what's actually going to happen. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company right here, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Have you had any talks about the goaltender? Have you had any talks with New Jersey here as we start to kind of get going and things like that?
No. Me and Fitzy talk all the time. Not necessarily about Juuse, but I know goaltending. He always circles back, and I go, "Oh, this is what we need if we're going to do something like that." I've made it very public. It has to be something that'll shake me a little bit and make sense for both teams, or I'm not going to. I'm in no hurry to do it. I don't need a goaltender. He does. So I keep reminding him of that. So, he's asset management. He's doing his diligence around the league, and as I said to Juuse, unless something knocks me, backwards, I'm always going to let him be in the fold.
Barry Trotz yesterday on the show basically saying, yeah, Tom Fitzgerald does call in New Jersey about Juuse Saros, and I tell him every time, if you want my goalie, you are going to have to absolutely knock my freaking socks off. But it was not nothing that Barry said in that cut on this show yesterday that he's talked to the goalie about it. That he sat down with Juuse Saros and he said, hey, if somebody knocks my socks off, I'm going to have to trade you. I'm going to have to do what's in the best interest of the Predators. That is not nothing. A lot of times everybody gets all tight. They're afraid to say, oh, no, we haven't had any talks about anything. We haven't this, we haven't that. Not Barry. And it would be reckless, especially given where it looks like this season is headed. It would be reckless if Barry Trotz did not have those discussions with other general managers around the league. But I was reading something today in which there was speculation that Barry Trotz is doing more than just picking up the phone. Barry Trotz is actively engaged in trade talks involving Juuse Saros. Now, I didn't get the vibe from talking to Barry yesterday that he was, again, actively making calls looking to deal the goalie. I think Barry's a pretty open book. And what he said right there was what I felt, which was, yeah, we're open on the goalie, but if you want to come to the table, you better absolutely shock us with an offer. And then I did some digging because, again, look, general managers sometimes don't tell the truth. And Barry has said time and time again he's got to do what's in the best interest of the Predators. But the report was that Barry was actively shopping the goalie. And I did some digging today, and I heard not only is that not the case, but I heard that I don't think it's very likely Saros gets moved. And I'm going to tell you why Saros isn't going to get moved. First of all, Askarov is playing out of his mind at Milwaukee. I do think we're at the point where it's time for Askarov sooner rather than later to get the call up to Nashville. And when he gets the call up to Nashville, maybe they can work him in. You know, the way that they went from Pekka Rinne to Juuse Saros. But sooner rather than later, he's going to be the goalie. And he's going to have to be the goalie on a night-in, night-out basis because in 2 years, Juuse Saros is headed to free agency, and they need to know if Yaroslav Askarov can be the goalie every single night. So that's going to happen sooner rather than later because I don't think they're going to pay Juuse Saros $10 million a year or $8 million a year or whatever it's going to cost for a high-end goaltender in a CBA with a collective bargaining agreement, with a cap that's actually about to go up. So there is kind of a time limit on some of this stuff. But because of who Juuse Saros is and what a Juuse Saros trade would represent and what Juuse Saros means to both Barry Trotz and the fan base, I don't think a trade is likely. Goaltending does not matter as much in the NHL as it used to. Now, the teams that don't have goaltenders probably don't feel that way. But the last two Cup champions, Vegas and Colorado, did it essentially by winging it in net. If I've got high-end forwards and I can just wing it in net, why would I pay 2 first-round draft choices and a high-end forward prospect who's NHL ready for a goaltender who might be red hot in the playoffs or who might be ice cold? Why would I do that? The only hope that you have in pulling something like that off is with a general manager who's about to be fired. And I don't know if there are any general managers that are on the hot seat that have teams that are a goalie away. And because of what Juuse Saros means to both the fan base and to Barry Trotz, I don't see anybody around the league coming in with an offer that is going to justify trading Juuse Saros to you all. Like if I told you right now, there was a kid playing on the third line last night for New Jersey. Ian, I can't remember his name. But people were telling me, hey, he's a pretty good, young, high-end forward. He could be a guy, he's 20-something years old. He could be a guy that Barry Trotz could target in a deal for Juuse Saros. If he only gets that one guy back, that guy better become Philip Forsberg. And if he doesn't, which is like a true number 2 center. A true number 2 forward. And if he doesn't, then everyone's going to say, you traded Juuse Saros for that? When not understanding that, again, goalies are not valued in the NHL the way they're valued here, especially this one. What you think of the goalie and the value of the goalie and what he probably thinks of the goalie and the value of the goalie is higher than I think the rest of the league thinks of the value of the goalie. So again, when it comes to Saros, I think Barry is going to stick to his asking price, which is going to be astronomical, and I don't think anybody's going to be willing to pay it. So this will ramp up. Like, this is just kind of the beginning of this. Because what's going to happen is Elliot Friedman's going to be on the midday show tomorrow, and they're going to talk left and right about goalie scenarios and trades, and this team could be interested, and this team could be interested, and this team could be interested, and this team could be interested. And then Barry's going to ask him for 2 first-round picks and a high-end young forward and maybe another prospect, and those teams are going to hang up the phone and say, no, we're not doing that for a goalie. See, this is kind of like Derrick Henry, right? The value that I have for Derrick Henry and the value that I think you all have for Derrick Henry is probably going to be higher than what the rest of the NFL thinks of Derrick Henry. I heard the midday show today talking about, I bet there's somebody out there who thinks they're a Derrick Henry away. Baltimore ran the ball 6 times in the AFC Championship game. You think they think they're a Derrick Henry away? If they were that concerned, they'd have run it more. Derrick Henry's a 2-down back who's 30 years old. The NFL doesn't value that. I think Derrick, and I like Derrick, and I wish the best for Derrick, I think he's going to be humbled when he gets out into free agency and he sees teams that are like, we'll offer you $2 million with incentives to get you up to 6. Wait a minute, what? I was making $10 million a year for the last 4 years. What are we talking about here? And I think that's what's going to happen. Again, we, the fans, value Derrick Henry more than the league does. We, the fans, value Juuse Saros as the Predators' goalie more than I think that the rest of the league values him. If you were to tell me that, hey, it'll be a first-round pick and 2 low-end prospects for Saros, that'd be done tomorrow. The Kings would jump on it. The Devils would jump on it. There'd be something like that. But that's not what Barry's looking for. I think Barry wants NHL-ready talent right now. Well, the teams that are trying to compete for the Cup, they need that NHL-ready talent right now in order to compete for the Cup right now. So I know the reports will say that talks are intensifying, and I know that, again, the Canadian media, the national hockey media, or I should say international hockey media, this is going to be the number one thing approaching the deadline is Saros. And what I heard is that it's not very likely. And that it is more likely that there's going to be a lot of talks leading up to the draft in Vegas this year than there probably will be around the deadline. But again, what do I know? 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phones. 615-737-1025. And then there's one little other aspect of this that I do find to be disappointing. We'll get to that. Stillman and Company, Window Nation. Nothing about Window Nation is disappointing. Window Nation is online at windownation.com. So I had Marion come out to my house from Window Nation. And I said, look, I don't know anything about my windows. Can you tell me what I'm looking for here? And her and I went through the windows, and I learned things about windows that I've never known. And that's why these people are experts. And so if your energy bills are driving you through the roof, give my friends at Window Nation a call. Window Nation is online at windownation.com. You can get a free in-home estimate today where they will look at your windows. And trust me, I wanted to know what they thought of my windows. And they said, you've got good windows. You've got very good windows. They told me I don't need to replace any of my windows. So if you don't need to replace your windows, they'll tell you that. But if you need to, and you need to get those energy efficient windows, if you want to pay, again, they're paying direct. They're paying wholesale because they have so many windows that they purchase that you're going to save money with them, and they're going to install it, and you're going to get that lifetime warranty. And it is cheaper than you think to install those windows and work on your energy costs and your home's value today. It's a lot easier than you think, because if you replace your windows, you can save big with 50% off all window styles and 0 down, 0 interest, and no payments for 24 months. Again, that is 50% off all window styles, 0 down, 0 interest, and 0 payments for 24 months. Call 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com and be like me. Schedule that free in-home estimate and you will not regret it. That's windownation.com.
Out toward the blue line, a shot by Jack Hughes, deflected away. Now traffic in front. Saros down on his knees, and they say the puck's in the net. That the Devils have taken the lead.
Well, what a scramble
There you go. That last night, I didn't even see what really happened because it was all cluttered around the net. I just saw the official come in and put his arm down for the goal, and I thought, oh, no. They had a shot at least a point. They really needed both points, and they're not going to get it. So there's one little thing that is starting to bother me, and I talked to Barry about this yesterday, and I think his frustration is there with mine, which is that going into the season with the Predators, it was like, okay, Forsberg and O'Reilly are good. Nyquist is a legitimate NHL player. Cody Glass and Tommy Novak showed a little something last year, and now they're going to bank on these young guys to see if this offensive coach can get one of these former first or second rounders to play like a first or second rounder, right? Tomasino, Evangelista, Parsonen, and I know he wasn't a first or second rounder, but you know what I mean. And so there was kind of hope that, I didn't expect these young kids to immediately take off and light the world on fire and go to the All-Star game or anything like that. But I did expect that one of them would establish himself as a top six forward in the NHL. And quite frankly, that hasn't happened. And that's frustrating. And that's why, again, for this team, if it's not Forsberg or O'Reilly, they're not scoring. And that's why, again, this team, can't even show us that they can't even be one of those peripheral contenders like you were in 2015 when you hadn't made the playoffs 2 years in a row. You retool a little bit on the fly. You send out Patrick Hornquist. You add James Neal. You've got Mike Fisher in the fold. Philip Forsberg really becomes a star, and so does Yossi all at the same time. Laviolette's the coach, and you really went toe-to-toe for 6 games with Chicago. You can't do that. You're not ready for that. And I thought maybe there was a chance you would be, but if the young guys don't develop, it's probably not going to happen. Let's go to your phone, 615-737-1025, and our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Neil says, if it is true, Jared, when it comes to trading Saros, it will be unfortunate. Saros has not been great this season, and if Trotz is asking for that, then it's too high. The Predators will lose Saros for nothing after another season. They shouldn't extend Saros. Askarov looks like the future if he keeps developing. Do not, in all caps, do not trade Askarov, says Neil. I don't think their plan is to trade Askarov. Now, they tried to trade Askarov when they tried to move up to number 4 in the draft with San Jose. I think he was on the table. But that was an extraordinary circumstance. I think everybody would agree that Yaroslav Askarov is the future of the Nashville Predators as of right now. Now, again, I think it's a fluid situation with both goalies. If Saros says up and down to Barry, I want to be here and I'll take a hometown discount and I believe this, then maybe that gives Barry, after this year, the ability to extend Saros and then trade Askarov. But I agree with you that when the Predators drafted him in the 2020 lottery, I agree with you that they weren't doing that because they wanted him to ride the pine for forever or they wanted to trade him. I think they did that because one day they believed that he was going to be the future of the Predators, and I think they probably still think that now. Texture says, in what way was last night a gut punch for the Predators? They are only 2 points out of a wild card spot, and they likely win that game if Toronto does not take the obvious second goal away. They have shown this season that they do have enough offense to get a wild card down the stretch. Well, it was a gut punch because they're 2 points out of a playoff spot, and the other teams have games in hand that if they had won last night, yes, they would still be technically out of the playoffs because the other teams have games in hand, but they'd be right there with them. I mean, this thing is going to come down to 1, 2, 3 points. That last playoff spot in the Western Conference. It is going to come right down to the wire. And last night, the Predators had a real chance. Like last night, they had a real chance to take those 2 points at home against a mid-level Eastern Conference team. Barry said yesterday on the show they need to win 2 out of every 3. Well, they beat Arizona on Saturday, and so if you win last night, there's 2 out of your 3, and now you play Dallas. Now, in order to keep up with that pace, you have to beat Dallas on Thursday night, who's first in the division, and then you go on what's really the road trip that I think is going to make or break the season, which is St. Louis, Vegas, L.A., and then what should be 2 gimme points at San Jose. And if they win 2 out of 3, throughout that, then good for them. But that was a game last night. Those were 2 points they could have had last night. That's why it was a gut punch. Because they had a shot. Texter says trading Saros would be like trading Jeffrey Simmons for a young, promising quarterback and a wide receiver. But nobody who likes their young quarterback would trade them for Jeffrey Simmons because you'd rather have the quarterback than the guy on defense. Agreed. Then again, if the Chiefs offered Chris Jones for Will Levis, not that they ever would because I think they're set at quarterback, but if they did, I might do that because I think Chris Jones is pretty good. Texture says, how likely do you think it is that they trade Lankin in at the deadline and bring up Askarov this year to back up Saros, and how much of a return could they get for Lankin? I do think that that's probably what's more likely to happen, is that they're more likely to deal Lankin into a team that's got a shaky one goaltender, and they can put Lankin in there, and he's kind of like an insurance policy that if the shaky one goaltender goes to crap, then they can turn around and they can put Lankin in there, though Lankin is a legitimate backup. I don't know. Ian, what do you think? 4th round pick maybe for Lankinen?
Yeah.
That probably sounds about right.
Something like that, maybe 4th or 5th.
Now, I am of the mindset, and I think Barry Trotz is this way too, that like last year was the year that they traded for picks. And now I think we're in the business of wanting guys that can contribute soon enough to the Nashville Predators. But I'm not going to poo-poo picks. And the reason I'm not going to do that is because I do think that the Predators, like, the big get of this rebuild may be somebody we don't even know is going to be available yet. Like I told Chase last night at the game, I said the best hope is that they sell at the deadline, continue to add the assets, and that somebody soon enough gets disgruntled, a high-end forward. Think about Matthew Tkachuk, right? Like a high-end forward gets disgruntled wherever they are, and you've got the picks and the cap space and the prospects, and again, you're Nashville, and you can just freaking sell the world to that guy. And I use Tkachuk as the example here, right? Tkachuk wanted that big old contract, and he only had a handful of places he wanted to play, and Nashville was not one of the places he wanted to play. But with Andrew Burnett, who was his coach in Florida, would he have wanted to come here? Now, you don't have Jonathan Huberdeau to trade, but there may not be a guy that's willing to give up, or a team that's willing to give up a high-end forward in order to get a high-end forward. And so that's the point of this whole thing, is that I think that the big piece out there to be had may not even know that he's going to get traded, may not be disgruntled, none of it. Texter says Devils player Jasper Bratt. He's pretty good. I mean, they're really good. Like, they are really, really good. Texter says, is this season about winning or developing the kids because they don't have a lot of future playing at the NHL level right now? I would agree with that. And I think the answer is that it's about developing the kids. But as Barry has said, they're going to cook them in the minors. They're not going to cook them in the NHL. There is a developing story. I don't have much to add on this other than it is horrendously despicable. But apparently shots were fired. Multiple people were struck. Multiple people were struck at the Kansas City Chiefs victory parade. Again, I don't have any more information on this. And unfortunately, this seems like a far too often thing. But 10 had been injured and one person was killed, according to the Kansas City police, at the Chiefs victory parade. I don't have much to offer on that. Stillman and Company, we continue 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
This is much like Brian. This would be your first opportunity to be a play caller at this level. What's your approach in that regard, and how do you feel like it'll go?
Well, it's still early in the process, but, we have OTAs, we have training camp. As we go through that cycle, you get better and better. You learn by doing, right? So you get better on your job. Iron sharpens iron. So we'll have call-it periods and all that stuff. So, you'll get better on the job. But also it goes back to what I just said earlier, the people that trained me to get here. And then I can't mention enough, the defensive staff that we put together, they're going to all be a part of it. When we get into game planning, they're going to have their own sections. They're going to be the head coach of their sections, whether it's third down, 2-minute, first and second down, drop back, the run game. So I'm going to lean on those guys. And then when we get in the game plan, into the game plan is already done.
There you go, Denard Wilson, the Titans' new defensive coordinator. And I heard his press conference today, and I liked it. I did. Now, again, I am nervous about a guy who's never called plays because I think there's an art to calling plays on defense, and he's never been a defensive coordinator where if the Titans had gone out and got one of these experienced old pawpaws, you know that guy would be able to call the plays. You know that he'd be able to run the defense. But I did like what I heard in the press conference. Again, it's a press conference. Not going to read too much into it. But I like what I heard. Chris Sanders joins us now on the program, former Titans receiver. So let me ask you this question as both a former player and a current high school coach, which is when it comes to these early stages with these new coaching hires, what am I supposed to look for so that I can get a feel as to whether or not these guys are going to be good coaches?
I mean, the thing about it is, he said, Denard Wilson said some great things. He said iron sharpens iron. Then also he said he's going to lean on these other guys. And I think the one thing you got to look for is early. You just got to trust the process. I know that's a lot of coach talk and a lot of stuff that we talk about. Things are going to look unfamiliar at first, but you're going to see things kind of come together, when you have OTAs and you have camp, and then actually when you have your first game of the season. So for you, Jared, and me, Jared, it may not look the way you think it should look right now, but the things that he said in his press conference, it just shows you that he has a process and he has a plan.
How much do you think there are things, from what we saw the Ravens do or the Eagles do last year or things in his past that are going to translate into what the Titans defense is going to be? And how much are things from, he says Greg Williams is a mentor. I wish he hadn't said that Jeff Fisher was a mentor of his. He did, but So how much are we going to see of that, and how much of it's going to be, hey, give him the players and then let's see what he does for his own thing?
Yeah, and you said it correctly. I mean, given the players, once he gets the players and, the team is kind of set, then you're going to start to see the scheme lead fruition. I mean, just kind of the stuff that he said. Listen to stuff that he said, to kind of like what Greg Williams also did when he was here with the Tennessee Titans, an attacking defense, your blitz at the right time in the back end, make sure you cover people. And then also he said the one thing you got to make sure on a defense to make sure that you're really, really balanced. So, even though at the beginning stages we might not see it, but I'm telling you, man, the stuff that Denard Wilson said, it just makes you feel positive. I think he's going to do a great, great job, even though this is his first time calling the defense.
So you used to practice against the Greg Williams defense every day.
Oh, my gosh. I hated it.
What do you expect? And to that point, do the Titans, and I know that the defense is going to get a huge facelift this year in free agency, but do the Titans have the personnel to be able to play Greg Williams ball?
I think they can. I mean, you're going to have to get some cats in the back. And I know the secondary, struggled, last year and the year before. But when you got Jeffrey Simmons, I don't know what they're going to do with Autry, but you can build around Jeffrey Simmons. Jeffrey Simmons is a beast. I mean, he's one of those players that impacts the game. He changes the game. But if you build around him and then get some, not just some players. We already had players. We need some impact players. We need some shutdown corners. We need some safety that can make some plays. I know you don't like Hooker, but I think Hooker, if he keeps developing, he can maybe do something well. But at the end of the day, I know you hate Hooker.
When did I say I didn't like Hooker?
I mean, you think he's an okay player. You said that you said on one of the shows.
I think that he is a good number 2 safety, but he gets hurt too much.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. But he does. But, if he keeps developing, he can be something good. But, when you have a Jeffrey Simmons, you can build, your team around him, get some players in the secondary, get some more linebackers that can run. And if you kind of do that, you're going to have a defense that can be one of the top defenses in the league.
Chris, is it wrong that I don't care anything that the offensive coordinator said today because I just think Brian Callahan's running the offense and that's all I care about?
He is, but, I know you hate it.
I don't hate it. I'm fine with it. You're the one that didn't want the coach calling plays. I want the coach calling plays.
Yeah, I mean, this is just my personal thought that you just have so many responsibilities during the week and during the day, and I just think you should let somebody else call it. I mean, look at. You're talking about Nick Holtz. He's not going to be calling the plays. He's going to be helping with the scheme. I just think that it's a great thing that they're doing, having guys bringing their formulas together and impacting the game. So we'll see what happens.
Chris Sanders is with us on the program. So I've been waiting to talk to you all week.
Oh gosh.
Do you know why?
Why?
Because never in my life have I given one poop about the coin toss in a game. But the coin toss
Thank you.
in overtime of the Super Bowl had humongous ramifications clearly. What did you think of Kyle Shanahan wanting the ball, given the situation of overtime? What did you think Sunday night? What do you think of it now?
I mean, I know a lot of times we're going to blame, the players and all that stuff, whatever. I think you really got to put, and I don't like to dog a coach or anything, but you got to put that on the coach, because if you listen to some of the players after the game, they said they didn't know the rules. And as a coach, you got to make sure you talk about that. I know you talk about X and O's and running routes and, defense and all that stuff, but you got to make sure you talk about the innuendos and talk about, if we go to overtime, this situation can happen. So if he can do it all over again, I think he will maybe go on defense and really understand the situation, what's going on. At the end of the day, we can put the blame on everybody else, but the coaches have to make sure they relay to the players so they know exactly what to do. So I can't blame anybody else but the coach, and I hate to say that.
I am shocked by this, Ian.
I'm not. I can't. It's hard for me to put down a coach because I coach, but oh man, this is hard, man. But
you think you got to go on defense first, so you know what you have to get when you're on offense?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's exactly
yes,
what I'm
that's
saying.
common sense.
I know it's common sense, but at the end of the day, you still, as a coach, I got to make sure I give him the right information and all the information, not just some of the information. So it's tough on both sides. I'll never talk about a coach, but I just think the coach made a bad decision in that situation by not informing them on what the heck to do.
You really have a problem with that, don't you, that the players didn't know about the rules, whereas Mahomes was saying that at Kansas City, they've drilled it every week of the playoffs.
There you go.
Before the playoff game, every single week. Because a part of me, Chris, thinks,
sure,
do the players really need to know the rules, or is it just, hey, this is what we need you to do on this play, go do it?
Yeah, and I'm gonna give you an illustration. I know it's kind of funny. Like say you're traveling, right, and you forget to take your toothbrush. You be like, man, I don't really need it. I'll find it, whatever. But then you wake up the next morning and you realize that you need it. And that's kind of like the same situation with football, right? It's like, well, we don't need to talk about the rules until you need it. And that's just a bad situation to where, you don't talk about it during the week. You don't talk about it in the Super Bowl. You don't talk about it, in the playoffs, because at the end of the day, when was the last time that you really had an overtime in the Super Bowl? So guys don't really think about it. And I think that as a coach, even though you may not think it's going to be there, you got to make sure you turn every stone and make sure everything's correct and giving the players the right information.
See, I'm surprised by this because you've always been somebody that cares about the coin toss. You've always wanted to win the coin toss, and you've always thought that it matters to get the ball first and to go down the field and to set the tone of the football game. And so I thought you were going to get on Shanahan and say, you know what, he wanted the ball. He was going to set the tone. He was going to.
No, time out. That's totally two different situations.
I agree.
I agree. Because overtime, it's on the line. I mean, everything's on the line. When you're talking at the beginning of the game, you're talking about a momentum shift. In this situation, it's more about strategy.
Well, I agree with you, right? Like, because, again, my thing is you need to know what you have to get.
1,000%.
I mean, the entire play calling changes if you know you've only got to get 17 yards in order to kick a field goal.
Yeah, and that's why, as a coach, I got to make sure that even though, like I said before, I'm talking about X and O's, I'm talking about defense, I'm talking about all these things, but there needs to be a moment that if I'm the offensive coordinator, if I'm the head coach, or I'm the defensive coordinator, that if we go into overtime, these are the rules, this is the strategy, and this is where we're going. Look at what Mahomes said. You just pointed it out, that if we go into overtime, this is our game plan, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to execute it. And that's exactly what Holmes did. They found out what they had to do, they executed the plan, and they won the Super Bowl. Why? Because they prepared in the back end, and when it came to fruition, they executed the plan. That's why they won the Super Bowl.
Former Titans receiver Chris Sanders, as always, joining us on the program. Chris, great football season. We will
Man.
continue to chat throughout the off season as the mock
Absolutely,
drafts
brother.
and everything else are coming out.
Hey,
But always appreciate your insight.
man, appreciate you. Love you so much, my brother.
Yeah,
All
love
right.
you too.
Bye-bye.
Chris Sanders joining us on the program as he always does. So coming up next, I've got to set the record straight on something. And so I'm going to do that. And I really don't want to have this discussion, but I'm going to. Because everybody apparently gets worked up every time I offer my opinion. So we'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 615-737-1025. Speaking of basketball, tune into 93.3 Classic Hits tomorrow as MTSU takes on New Mexico State at home. Pregame is at 6 o'clock. Tip-off is at 6:30, and coverage is also available on the 93.3 Classic Hits app and at 933classichits.com. And then tune into Vandy women's basketball tomorrow on 94.9 The Fan as they take on A&M on the road. Pregame at 7:45, tip-off at 8. And coverage is also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at 949thefan.com. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Studios. Again, breaking news that we are following. 8 to 10 people were injured after a shooting near the Kansas City Chiefs victory parade today. Police say 2 people were taken into custody, and I have seen a report from the Kansas City police that 1 person has died. And so, tragic and incredibly depressing that at the Chiefs victory celebration that this would happen. Albeit, as our society continues down this path, it's not overly surprising. That being said, it makes everything else that we talk about on a day like today, it makes the sports stuff kind of trivial. But let me just say this. I enjoy my job. And so when it comes to talking about sports, I take it seriously, and I know you guys take it seriously, and you care about your teams. And I just want to recognize the difference between what is really serious and then, of course, kind of the escapism and the fantasies and the sports and everything else that we get into. So I got to tell you something. I understand what it is like to have an opinion and to have everybody react off of your opinion. Quite frankly, it's kind of fun. Now, a lot of people seem to believe that I just say things to say them to get people to react. And if you know me, you know that's not true. You know that what I say is what I believe. I even yelled at Michelle Beadle when I, not yelled at her, but yelled with her on Friday about that right here on the show. So yesterday, Gentry Estes penned a column in the Tennessean, which I heard about when I was listening to Robbie and Rexroad. I read the column in the Tennessean about Titans general manager Ran Carthon. I agreed with the column in the Tennessean, and then we talked about that. And what's happened is every time I talk about Ran Carthon, everybody loses their freaking mind. Twitter goes insane. Yesterday it started with TD, but then it was so many people were tweeting and saying this and that about, oh my God, how dare they employ that Jared Stillman for having the opinion that the general manager is not very good? And quite frankly, if you want to get so mad at me that it shames me into not talking about the general manager anymore, you're doing a good job. Because what it does is it makes me not want to talk about it. The problem is that this is my job. And what you guys care about, the general manager, the head coach, the quarterback, the goalie, that's what you guys care about. You guys don't care about whether or not the Titans should re-sign to Nico Autry. We could talk all day about that. But again, it's always about the coach and the general manager and everything else. And so if you think you're going to shame me, and this is for everybody, because, I mean, Twitter was exploding last night. If you think you're going to shame me into changing my opinion, that's not going to happen. What's going to happen to change my opinion is that this general manager attacks free agency and the draft, and that the Titans get good players, and that the Titans let their coaches, who as of right now, I think they might be pretty good, but I have no idea. They let their coaches develop the players, and the Titans get on the football field on Sundays and win some games. That the general manager has some press conferences. That unlike his draft press conference, and unlike the one after the season, the last one he did, doesn't end in an unmitigated disaster. That's all I'm asking for. But I did see your comments, and I'm going to respond to them. And there was a lot of, again, people that were pushing back on it, people that were in support of it, and that, I guess, is what polarization is. So there are 3 things that I want to clear up right now about my criticisms of Ran Carthon. The first is this. Stop with the racist stuff, okay? I'm not racist. Mike Vrabel, Ken Wisenhunt, David Poyle, John Hines, they all got it from me. The same way Ran Carthon's getting it from me. And you know it if you listen to this show. And I had some knockdown dragouts with everybody over John Hines. I mean, it was, Ian, back me up on this. The John Hines thing, I mean, I got in trouble over the John Hines criticism at times.
Yeah, you did once, yeah.
I did. Again, I didn't like John Hines the day they hired him. I didn't think his resume was good. I thought he was full of it. I didn't think he was a very good coach. And everybody said, just give him a chance, just give him a chance, just give him a chance. How'd that work out? Again, I want the Predators to be good, folks. But to sit there and say, oh, I wonder why Jared's going after Ran Carthon. What do you think that is? Well, then why'd I go after Mike Vrabel? Why'd I go after John Hines? Why'd I go after David Poyle? You see, it's really not that complicated, right? If I think you're doing a bad job, I'm going to point it out. And if I think you're doing a good job, like in the 2021 season when the Predators were god-awful and in the middle of the year they turned it around and they made the playoffs, I argued that John Hines, who I don't even like as a coach, that John Hines should be getting Jack Adams votes because of the job that they did. So again, I mean, when it comes to the, oh, well, I know why he's saying this. What do you think? When you insinuate that I am going after the Titans general manager because I am racist, what you're doing is you're telling me more about you than you are telling me about me. Because it is ignorant, given all of the things that I have said over the last 9 years that I've been on the radio here, and how, again, it is very consistent in terms of my criticisms. I criticized Vrabel like crazy. You want to know? Ask Vrabel what he thinks of me. So stop with that. That stuff is intellectually dishonest. And not only that, I mean, I was going after Chad Brinker last week because I heard things I didn't like on his podcast. So I'm sick and tired of this. I had to defend it when it came to DeAndre Hopkins, who for the second time accused me of being racist. And now there's all of this. I'm not dealing with it. It's ridiculous. And I'm dismissing it. The second thing, and I will say this again. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I want to be wrong about this. Like, I don't think you guys understand. A lot of people in the media, and it's kind of crazy, right? Because a lot of people act like they're not fans, but then they say things like, let Rand cook, baby, and tighten up. They say it on the radio. Not me. But I love the Titans. I went to the Super Bowl in 2000. And I cried when I was 10 years old and they lost by a yard. I was like Deebo Samuel after the game. My first ever heartbreak was the next year. I talked to Brian Billick about it last week at the Super Bowl. I'm like, that was my first ever heartbreak in life, was that Titans-Ravens loss. So I want the Titans to be good. You think I enjoyed, for instance, how the Predators have been the definition of mediocre for the last 3 years? I mean, congratulations to me because I was right about the coach and the general manager. But what's that done for me? You know what I enjoy talking about a lot more? An active trade deadline where it's, if the Predators get this player, they might be a cup contender. I enjoy that a lot more. In fact, I was wrong about the 2017 Chicago series. I thought Predators were going to get blasted in 5 games. They swept Chicago. You know who enjoyed it? Me. So when you guys act like, oh, this is some personal vendetta, it's not. I want to be wrong. I want the general manager of the Titans to be good. I want Will Levis to be a franchise quarterback, and I want the Titans to be playing in the Super Bowl. And if you, again, have listened to this show and you don't know that I love these teams, maybe a little too much, well, that's on you. And then third, is it really too much to ask the general manager of your football team that has been given full control of the roster to have a press conference? Is it really too much to ask him to have a press conference in which he says a little something? And I mean something better than, the ball didn't bounce our way in our 6-win season. Floyd had a book that he created for an interview that he did with the Seattle Seahawks when he was interviewing for the GM job that ultimately went to John Schneider. And in it, he had a 21-point job description in which one of the points was, quote, must help develop and maintain relationships with all key media members. Does that sound like it's a big ask? It is impossible to argue that Rand Carthon has done that. Now, a lot of you think that it doesn't matter because when it comes to the media, you don't like the media. When it comes to press conferences, you've seen far too many people that have won you over in a press conference only to go out and lose you on the football field. But that doesn't mean that that doesn't matter. That doesn't mean that people don't watch those things. That doesn't mean that fans can't have a sense of where their team is headed. Because that's what those press conferences are for. They're for the fans. They're not for me. They're for you. And is it too much to ask somebody who makes millions of dollars a year and is running the football team? Is it too much to ask them to, I don't know, occasionally talk to the media? Apparently so. Apparently it's the worst thing in the world that Jared Stillman said. Oh, I can't believe. It's impossible to argue that they've done that. Now look, again, I think that I would qualify as a key media member, considering that the Titans spent 10 minutes on their podcast talking about that Senior Bowl thing, about why he didn't go and defending that decision, when I even said at the time that I didn't think it was a big deal. And I still don't. I don't like it. I disagree with it, but I don't think it's a big deal. So again, I'm going to criticize. If I see things I don't like, I'm going to criticize. Just like I criticized David Poyle, and I was right. Just like I criticized John Hines, and I was right. Just like I criticized Mike Vrabel, and I was right. Just like I criticized Ken Wisenhunt, and I was right. So you guys can get as mad as you want, every single one of you on Twitter, but I'm not going to change. And I'd like to be wrong. But just like with John Hines, you can keep telling me I don't understand. I'll keep waiting on the results. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. And I do have a thought on this. That the Capital J Journalism Coalition this morning on Robbie and Rex Road, boy, they got on me about something. But I'm not even sure that I did what I'm accused of. We'll get to that in your phones next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
I'm on Twitter yesterday, and TD, Teron Davenport, is tagging him, and he's just going off on. I wasn't listening to Jared, but apparently he's still going hard on the. I did hear one thing he said where it was like, you need to put your board together. That's why you need to be at the Senior Bowl. Like, no, you don't have to be at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama to put your board together and to do. What are you talking about?
This is something that Jared, again, like there's certain stuff that he just doesn't understand how it works. So, and
why don't you educate him?
When he's told how it works, he doesn't seem to want to understand how it works.
That was this morning on Robbie and Rex Road with Paul in for Robbie. And I got to defend myself on this. Because, Ian, was yesterday's topic about the Senior Bowl?
No, I don't think so.
I have stopped caring about that. I said when it happened, I said, look, this isn't a big deal. I didn't even know he wasn't at the Senior Bowl until somebody texted in. And I figured, oh, he must be at the Senior Bowl. This person who's texting into the text line must be wrong. And then I found out that they weren't. And I said, I don't like it. That's what I said. I don't like it. And then it blew up, and it became this whole Jared Stillman doesn't understand. And then I said, fine, I don't care anymore. I never thought it was a big deal. I just said, I don't like it. Just like there are times I'm sure your wife does things that you don't like. You certainly should not tell her those things on Valentine's Day, but you think in your head, I don't like it. But are you going to divorce her? You know what I'm saying? And so that's how I felt this whole time. But then when they did the Titans podcast last week and they spent 10 minutes sitting there and basically between Coach Mack and Mike Keith and Rand Carthon, I mean, basically awarding Rand for not going to the Senior Bowl. I'm like, okay. They're mad about that or whatever. And I just said, look, their whole celebration of not going to the Senior Bowl was about trying to get a coaching staff together. That's great. I don't agree with it. I, again, think that players are more important than coaches. But, again, I don't care. Do whatever you want. I mean, am I not allowed to have an opinion about what I like or don't like? But, again, yesterday, we weren't even talking about that. And so these two capital J journalists get on there this morning about, oh, God, there he goes talking about the Senior Bowl. Again, my God, he's making a big deal about it. And then they make a big deal about it. And I don't even remember saying that yesterday. About this. I don't care. But here's what I do think's funny. So this morning, as they were incorrectly accusing me of bitching about the Senior Bowl, which I did 2 weeks ago, and again, I don't care that much. I've moved on. Paul goes into this long rant about how nobody should listen to me because I am not an authority on the Senior Bowl.
Stilly, I don't believe, has been to a Senior Bowl. So he's being the authority on what you need to go to the Senior Bowl to see, never having been to one. So stop listening to him about this. Ask yourself this question every time you're listening to somebody on the radio, on a sports talk show, any sports talk show. What is the basis of their authority? On this, Jared has no basis of authority. He's going to continue to act like he does, but he does not.
Okay. First of all, I told you I don't care anymore. But since we're going to play this card of he's never been to the Senior Bowl, he doesn't know. Kind of like when players say, I played the game, so I know my assistant coaches are great. Like Craig Aukerman, Jared. So even though that's what that sounds like, how about we do listen to somebody who is an authority on these things, right? Former Falcons general manager Thomas Dimitrov on our show last week at the Super Bowl. He hired Rand Carthon into the NFL. I would say, Ian, again, I would say that if we're going to talk about who's an authority, Paul's been to the Senior Bowl, so I guess in his mind that makes him more of an authority than me. I'm going to guess the guy who was general manager of an NFC champion and general manager for like 15 years, I'm going to guess he would be a better authority than me and him, right?
I guess you could make that argument.
Okay, Thomas Dimitrov last week.
You can argue both sides. Is it the best use of your time to be a GM there or not?
So what do you think?
I like it personally. I want to be there. I don't want to be there all the way through. I would usually go for 2 or 3 days, the beginning of the week, and make sure I got a feel for everyone. I saw everyone, and then I went back and watched the video. I needed to see them live.
Okay. So that guy, when you listen to a sports talk show, you need to know who has authority. I think that guy has authority, right? He's general manager. He's done this. He hired your general manager. So I think when you listen to this sports show, that's an authority. And the only thing I know that Paul Kaharski's an authority on is taking what Mike Vrabel texts him and tweeting it out as if it's a fact. That's the only thing I know. Carrying the water. Now, he won't admit to that, but it's absolutely true. But no. He's the authority on the Senior Bowl. And again, I don't care. I don't care. If you want to say it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. Again, I just don't like it. And am I allowed to not like it? Am I allowed to not like things, or do I have to like everything because everybody tells me I have to like it? You see what I'm saying? So yesterday, we were not talking about the Senior Bowl. In fact, we were talking about the Gentry Estes column in the Tennessean that Robbie and Joe were talking about earlier in the day, which is how I knew of the existence of the column. I heard Robbie and Joe talking about it. I talked about the column because I found the column to be fascinating and to be right. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, here he goes again, week 18 of the Senior Bowl. And I've said many times, I don't care anymore. I don't care. And I really don't. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. You guys got a lot of phones you want to get in. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company rolling along, 1025, 1063 The Game.
I promise you, like we want to get this right. You know what I mean? And I know that we're not going to make every decision that appeases people. But trust me, every decision that we make is, with this organization in mind and is what we think is the best. Again, this is player acquisition. It's always a gamble, if you will, whether it's free agency, whether it's draft, because there's so many different things that contribute to a player being successful. That's why football is the ultimate team game. You can't win it by yourself. It takes you and 10 other people to be on the same page, moving in the same direction to make it happen. So every decision that we make is, will be for the betterment of this football team, this organization, and this city.
There you go. That was Rand Carthon. And I agree. That's what I want to have happen. By the way, Andrew's texted in. Our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Andrew's texted in and said, Jared loves Derrick Henry more than his family. He definitely is not racist. I appreciate that. By the way, Chase texted me. And Chase was like, you forgot Kevin Stallings. How could you leave? Boy, I used to go after Kevin Stallings. So Paul is called in to defend himself. Should we take his call?
You asking me?
Sure.
Yeah, I think so.
PK, you get 30 seconds. Go.
30 seconds. Yeah, you're going to pass on ratings gold and put me on a 30-second time.
That might be true. I should have teased that you were coming up, but I didn't know.
Give me a break. You didn't know. Look, I let go of the Senior Bowl thing. I didn't know the context of you re-bringing it up. I didn't say I was an authority on the Senior Bowl. And Thomas Dimitroff, he said, given a choice, I'd rather be there. He didn't say it would be suicidal for me not to be there. I'm saying it's another thing that you have no experience with, and you don't understand the mechanics of it. You still don't, about being there and being distracted by other people and all of that. But I'll put that aside. But for you to suggest that I've been carrying water for Mike Vrabel is ridiculous. I know you think Mike Vrabel hates you because you appeared twice a month at his thing. I was at virtually every Mike Vrabel press conference.
Paul, you know what I'm talking about, right?
My father died, and I missed a couple. I don't know what specifically you're talking about, but I in the general perception of people, I was the enemy of Mike Vrabel. I got scolded more by Mike Vrabel. I stood up to Mike Vrabel more than anybody. If you think I'm carrying water for Mike Vrabel, you're insane.
So here's what happened. When Teair Tart got released, somebody texted me that Vrabel had texted them. And I was on the phone with that person. Not going to say who. But they said that Vrabel had texted them and that Vrabel had said that the most important thing was the respect of the teammates. And Tart had none. And then Vrabel texted that same person the same thing again. So I knew this was a massive media text, right? I texted Joe at like 6:45. And I said to Joe, did Vrabel text you? And Joe said, not that I would tell you, but what are you referring to? And I said, something about Tart and his teammates not respecting him. And he said, no, I haven't got that one yet. And then at 7:30, you tweeted, I got more info on Teair Tart. He had lost all the respect of his teammates. Now, as a capital J journalist, PK, did you check with Teair Tart's teammates before you put that out?
As a capital J journalist, Jared, do you think that Mike Vrabel's the only person in the building that felt that way?
Your report was verbatim what somebody else had been told verbatim by Vrabel.
Well, first off, it's like you're saying verbatim. It's like 6 words.
That would be verbatim.
Lost respect of his teammates, 5 words. So if he's saying those 5 words, he's probably repeating those 5 words to his coaching staff and to his players, which opens up a building of about, let's say, a coaching staff of 25 and a locker room of, let's just say, the defensive side of the ball, so 30 guys. So that opens it up to another 55 guys.
So you're telling me that somebody else told you
could hear
the exact same thing that Vrabel said to that person and texted them twice?
I'm telling you that Vrabel is probably telling 55-plus people that, plus media, and I could hear it from any number of those people or a few of those people confirm it with. And that's probably how it worked.
Or Vrabel texted you, and you, wanting to look like the authority that you were talking about earlier today, you said, I have more info, Titans Twitter. Here's my breaking news because I'm the insider. And again, it was the message that Vrabel wanted out there. And you were the only one that carried it, Paul. Everybody else knew that Vrabel was trying to push a narrative, and they didn't put it out there. You did.
Well, again, I'm not telling you how I came upon the information. There's a wide amount of people that had the information, and Pierre Tart was a bad team. I talked to Danico Autry on the record about him. You could go find it, and he said, it's a shame what's happened to this guy. I'm trying to talk to him and not getting through, or something to that effect, which is a pretty strong statement from Danico Autry, who doesn't really expand on much or talk about much. I am, Jared, pretty well sourced in the building, even now with some turnaround, with a lot of turnaround going on. So if you want to talk about a single-sourced guy, when you have a son of a big daddy agent and you call him an NFL source and he hears some stuff from the Titans building, I'd much rather be getting stuff from decision makers and people close to decision makers than from somebody who might hear something from a player from his dad who's his agent.
What are you referring to, Paul?
That's three times removed. So I'll take my source.
So you're saying, first of all,
source.
First of all, for everybody out there, and I don't want to bring somebody else into this, but that's what you're doing. You're referring to Tommy Condon, who is Tom Condon's son, who is an agent in his own right in the NFL and negotiated the contract for Harold Landry and represents Peter Skoronski and represents Joe Alt and represents Mac Jones and other players across the league. And you're throwing him under the bus to say that I heard from him because his dad was one of the best agents of all time. And you're throwing him under the bus because you don't know who I'm talking to.
I didn't name anybody. You just named him.
No, but everybody knows who you're talking about. So I'm just going to put it out there, unlike you, who's trying to be slick about it. You think that's who I'm talking to. That may or may not be who I'm talking to. I talk to other people.
Well, now you're gonna do the same dance that I just did when you falsely accused me of being a
I didn't falsely accuse you. You took it verbatim. I think that's enough to win a trial against you on.
Oh, please. You know as much about sourcing. What's Jim Wyatt's favorite line? Baskin Robbins is where you get scoops.
You only get the ones that Vrabel hand delivers, Paul. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, that's the only news I had. I got Frank Wycheck dying from Vrabel. I got all my info.
Well, way to turn this into an incredibly morbid discussion on that front. And I don't think that I don't want to talk about Frank dying. Paul, thank you for joining us on the program. All right, what do you guys think? I did promise your phones, and then Paul called in, and we let him defend himself. So what do you guys think? And again, I'll say this. Like when I'm sitting there saying like a league source, regardless of whether or not, I talk to different agents and I talk to different, like I've got my own agent, all kinds of stuff. To me, a league source is somebody who works inside the league. So when I say a league source, I am talking about somebody who is employed in the NFL. Just want to clarify that for everybody. All right, your thoughts. 615-737-1025. And here's the real question I have. Was I wrong for throwing Paul under the bus on the Vrabel Pierre Tart thing? Does Paul have plausible deniability? Add that to the list, and we're to more of your phones in what has been a wild hour. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Tomorrow, it's your chance to participate in Preds Pick to Click. If you correctly guess a Preds player that scores a goal in the Preds game tomorrow night, you win a pair of tickets to an upcoming Preds home game. Participate with Robbie and Rexroad tomorrow morning at 8:45 a.m. Preds Pick to Click, presented by TJ Anderson Homes and Benchmark Realty. List your home with TJ to get your home seen, heard, and sold. By the way, is Paul in tomorrow for Robbie?
I do not know that.
Let me just say this, and I want everybody to hear this very clearly. I still like Paul. Now, I've said this about a lot of people. I have no idea if he likes me. I assume he probably doesn't. But just because someone doesn't like me doesn't mean that I don't like them. I like him just fine. And I say this as I see the Kansas City mayor holding a press conference right now after what happened at their victory Super Bowl parade today. And as I started the hour, look, there are two separate things. There's real life and there's sports. And I know that it's more than a game to us. It's certainly more than a game to me. But at the end of the day, it's sports. It's sports, and then there's the other side of it. And so when it comes to the criticisms of Rand Carthon, when it comes to the criticisms of the Predators or Jerry Stackhouse or Clark Lee or Tennessee football fans, or it's not personal, folks. It is, again, sports. So I just want everybody to know that. But again, I started off the hour by saying it drives me crazy that every time I talk about Rand Carthon, everybody gets all bent out of shape one way or another. Like, can I not have my opinion? And look, if my opinion is wrong, the Titans will turn it around and they'll win football games. And then everybody can say, hey, you got it wrong, Jared. Ha, ha, ha. And I hope you get to do that. I really do. Again, I don't think that's going to happen. I hope it does. I like the coach. I like the defensive coordinator, whom Rand helped hire. But I got to have my opinions now. That's what this show's based off of. And one other thing I'll say, because some people are like, well, you just keep talking about it over and over and over and over again. The reason that we do that is because that's what you all want to hear. Okay? Like, there's a certain period of time in radio called the holiday period. And during the holiday period, usually a lot of people take off. They got stations playing Christmas music. People aren't working as much. It's a different kind of period of time. And we absolutely annihilated the holiday period. Why? Because we spent every day talking about Vrabel and Rand Carthon and the drama and all the stuff that people said there was nothing behind it. Vrabel's coming back. And I said, no, there's some meat on this bone. And we talked about it at length every day, and you all listened. Back to your phones. 615-737-1025 here on the program. Texter says, the same issue that you have with Joe and sometimes PK is the same problem I and many have with them because we're not capital J journalists, so we don't know sports. They are both know-it-alls to the in the conversation, remotely looking like sports. Joe in his word salad condescending tone and PK with his arrogant attitude. I will say this about Joe and his capital J journalism thing. That's the fun part about this. Like, that's why Jared versus Joe is fun. Because we argue, and Joe gets all in his way of Caroline saying, do you think there's any way the Titans can win the Super Bowl next year? And Joe says something like, do I think they could? That's the fun part. And then we bust on him because it's like, oh, come on, have some fun. That's the fun part of it. It'll be okay. Texter says Paul and Jared aren't that far off in their comments on Rand. I don't understand that. Are Paul's comments similar to my comments about Rand? I mean, I feel like I'm pretty much on an island here where I'm looking at Rand Carthon. Well, Gentry, because Gentry did write in the Tennessean that he's tired of all the fluff and the bull crap and the, oh, no, you guys, I just wish you guys could see that Rand Carthon's a great general manager. And he wrote at the Tennessean, well, why don't you let us see? Why don't you have a press conference? And I saw people yesterday in relation to Gentry's column that were mad at the Tennessean. And I didn't even think Gentry's column was that poignant, right? I think he just said, I'm tired of the Titans going out of their way every 5 minutes to pump up Rand Carthon's tires when he won't do a press conference. So how am I supposed to know that he's really as good as they say he is? That was the gist of the article. I'm sorry, is that bad? I think what this is sometimes there are a lot of people out there that can't accept 1 ounce of negativity until it is too late and it is too obvious that everything is going down the drain, and then it's like, oh no, Butch Jones sucks. It's like we've been trying to tell you that for forever. When they fumble the ball 5 times and lose in overtime to Texas A&M, and Butch gets up there after the game and says, well, it must really mean something that we turned the ball over 5 times and we still had a chance to win the game. It's like, you moron. There's no silver lining here. You turned it over 5 times, you lost. And finally, it happens enough that people are like, oh, no, wow, we really are bad. And they accept it. Like, I'm sorry. To me, it is okay. Like, it's okay to look at your team and say, oof, I don't know if I like that. I don't know if I like it. Like drafting a guard at 11, I don't like that. So I'm not going to change my opinion that I do like it because, oh, it's a guard. Boy, the text messages are just, oof. One texter says, last year Rand got a free paycheck, and this year he's going to have to earn it. Let's see what he does. This would be the question that I have for everybody who defended, who's defending the company line with the Titans right now when it comes to Rand, which is, so what did he do last year? Because that is the company line. The company line is now, well, he deferred to Vrabel. Last year doesn't count, so now let's worry about this year. But all that time last year, when people were saying, oh, does Rand do anything? It was like, how dare you say that Rand doesn't do anything? How dare you? And it's like, so last year you were telling me that they were collaborating and they were working hand in hand. Remember that video of them in the open portion of practice where they were sitting there laughing it up after PK had come out and had criticized them for not seeing them together at practice? And it was like, well, I thought they were collaborating and working together because that's what you all told me then. So now you're all telling me now that everything that happened last year was Vrabel's fault and none of it's Rand's fault. And that last year didn't count. I mean, is that fair? So I believe you then, and I didn't get the results I wanted and the results that you told me I should expect. And so now I'm questioning that, and you're trying to sell me on a completely different narrative. And you know what that is? That's what a Ponzi scheme is, folks. Like, that's how Ponzi schemes operate, right? Instead of giving you any specifics about how they're going to get there, they just sit down and say, give us your money. And for $10,000, in 8 weeks, this will be worth $100,000. How? And then they give you some spiel about something that we aren't either educated enough to know anything about or smart enough to truly comprehend, but they use big buzzwords and it sounds good, like Chad Brinker talking about using AI software that a guy who he went to business school with, who's out there curing cancer, came up with to find market inefficiencies in football to save the owner $1 million or $2 million, to which I raise my hand and I say, okay, that sounds great, but why'd you give Aaron Brewer $4.3 million? And nobody has the answer to that. But that's what the Ponzi scheme is, right? They give you the big words, the big everything, and they promise these huge returns, and then when it doesn't happen, they move the goalpost. Oh, no, we're reinvesting and liquidating into blah, blah, blah. That's what that is. So you tell me last year that Rand was in charge and he was collaborating and corroborating and everything else, and now, no, that was all Vrabel's fault. That's not, I mean, again, you guys can believe it because you can believe whatever you want to believe. And I know a lot of this is affirmation. A lot of people want to believe what they want to believe. Justin says, I think you hit a nerve with PK. I really don't think I did. Texter says, Rand is a big boy, and if he is good at his job, the proof will be in the pudding, which I hope is a delectable pudding because I want the Titans to succeed. Everyone needs to chill out. Criticizing people is not a crime. It is a due diligence. So this is what I always say, and maybe this is me trying to justify what is, again, strongly opinionated shows, which is, look, man, I know it's hard to be criticized in your daily life, and I'm sure there are people that do their jobs every day who don't get criticized. I understand that. And I understand that people have families and their families hear things and their kids hear things and I get it. That's why you get paid millions of dollars. Like, that's the two-way street there. And I am always reminded of that, and I always try to remind other people of that. Like, when it comes to, oh, my teenage daughter heard at school that you said that I'm not a good coach or whatever it may be. Well, is your teenage daughter taking out student loans to go to college, or is it paid for because you make a buttload of money? And I always think that that's kind of the two-way street there. Texture says, I love the Titans, but what the hell have they ever done to deserve this blind, unquestioned loyalty from a large chunk of the fan base? I don't think that this is, new. I think that this is just kind of, and I don't think that it is unique to the Titans. Because Vols fans are the same way. Preds fans used to be that way for forever. I mean, I used to get into it with Preds fans that would believe any narrative they ever heard. And it used to drive me crazy. So I just think that that's sports fans. Okay, enough of that. Coming up next, Field Yates came on our show last week from ESPN at the Super Bowl. He said he had a mock draft coming out. I was certain who Field Yates was going to have the Titans taking with the 7th pick. I got to be honest, I was shocked. We'll do that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106 for the game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Studios. So Field Yates, ESPN, came on our show last week, and he said on Valentine's Day, I am going to be dropping my first mock draft at ESPN.com. And I told Field at the Super Bowl, I said, well, then that'll probably be our 2 o'clock topic that day. Now, we got the hockey to get into and football and everything else, but I was excited this morning when Ian texted me about Field's mock draft. Now, let me just say this. We talked to Field at length about Joe Alt. And he said to me, as he was going his way, I was going my way, when we got done talking, I said, hey, you got Joe Alt going with the 7th overall pick? And Field gave me the impression that he had Joe Alt going to the Titans with the 7th overall pick. So this morning, Ian texted me and says, you need to check out Field's mock draft. Number 1, no shock there, Caleb Williams. Number 2, Jaden Daniels. A little surprising. Most people have May ahead of Daniels, but he wouldn't be the only one. Number 3, Drake May. Number 4, Marvin Harrison Jr. Number 5 to the Chargers, Joe Alt. Now, here's what Field Yates wrote about that, because everybody's been saying Joe Alt to the Titans, Joe Alt to the Titans. Field wrote, a compelling march is ahead for the Chargers with important decisions to make on receivers Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. They each enter the final year of their deals and had injury issues last season. But this pick, Joe Alt to the Chargers, is reflective of what I believe the roster will look like under new GM Joe Horitz and head coach Jim Harbaugh, full of tough, physical, relentless players like Alt, who masterfully turned into an outstanding left tackle at Notre Dame. I'd expect Alt to start his career with the Chargers at right tackle, taking over for Trey Pipkins and forming a potential dominant duo with left tackle Rashawn Slater. Now, where did I hear yesterday to watch out for Joe Alt to the Chargers with the 5th pick? And what I was told was this: don't rule out the Chargers with the 5th overall pick. And I said, the Chargers? Remember, the Chargers have Rashawn Slater at left tackle. And I said, the Chargers? They said, yes. Jim Harbaugh loves Joe Alt, from what I was told, and that he wants to build this team through the trenches. Now, that sounds a lot like what Field wrote. But again, when I talked to Field, Ian, what day did we have Field on last week?
Wednesday?
Sounds about right. When I talked to Field a week ago, I was convinced Field was going to have Joe Alt at 7 to the Titans, which means Field must be hearing the same thing that I heard at the Super Bowl about Joe Alt and Jim Harbaugh. Now, the next question I think we'd have is, okay, well, who goes with the 7th pick then? And Field Yates has the Titans after Malik Neighbors goes at 6 to the Giants, at 7 drafting Rome Odunze, the wide receiver out of Washington. And, as Field said on the program last week, if it becomes a Joe Alt or a Neighbors or Joe Alt and Rome Odunze, then the Titans cannot get that pick wrong.
If they have that debate, a Joe Alt versus Malik Neighbors, Joe Alt versus Rome Odunze debate, I think the answer is yes. Like, take whichever you feel you have a slightly higher grade on, or if you have, the identical grade to those players, then I think you just have to make a philosophical decision.
Okay, which is, hey, if you don't end up with Alt, but you end up with Rome Odunze, you're in good shape. But here's the only problem I have with that. I would love Rome Odunze on the Titans. The problem I have with that is then I don't know where you get your left tackle from. Because, again, going back to Field, the way this draft is starting to shape up, it doesn't feel like there's going to be left tackles that are available after the first round of the draft. And I go back to free agency where the list is Tyron Smith, Donovan Smith, Kendall Lamb, Mekhi Becton, who's got a weight issue, Trent Brown, who's got a weight issue. Like, again, guys that are not impressive in terms of left tackle, that certainly are not franchise pieces that would be out there in free agency. And again, going back to what Field said, if you go Rome Odunze in the first round at 7 overall, Rome Odunze is a great player, there may not be that tackle that's available for you in the second round.
I would say a tackle. It is deep, but the cliff comes a lot sooner than a wide receiver, right? So I think there's maybe 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 tackles that can be first-year starters in the NFL, and candidly, 9 and 10 might be more like it's going to take a full year to get those guys to be where you want them to be at, all right? At pick 37, is that correct?
I think 38.
38. They can hit at wide receiver at 7 or at 14, and like 38, 39, like there's going to be an awesome wide receiver available there.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have little doubt about that, right? Like Ladd McConkey from Georgia, guy was borderline uncoverable down there at the Senior Bowl. You've got Adonai Mitchell from Texas. He's probably going to go in the first round, but Xavier Worthy, his teammate from Texas, is going to be there. We don't know. It's hard to forecast past about the first 8 or 9 picks here, but there are going to be guys that have a real chance to be year one starters at wide receiver that will be there at 38, 39. Tackle, I think there's a chance that 7th, 8th tackle is there, but the risk you run in bypassing a tackle in the first round is that it's not a guarantee. Like those tackles could just fly off the board because a lot of the teams that want to win right now that are already in the playoffs actually have bigger gaps at offensive tackle than you might realize.
As you go through Fields' mock draft, Cincinnati at 18 taking Flunga, the tackle out of Oregon State. Miami at 21 taking the tackle out of Washington, who I think is also kind of a guard. Arizona at 27 taking J.C. Latham, the tackle out of Alabama. And San Francisco at 31 taking Amarius Mims, the tackle out of Georgia. So Field predicts that all those first-round tackles, there will not be a tackle available for you if you don't go tackle at 7. So what do? Again, I would love Roma Dunze on the Titans. If I am standing there with the card in my hand, let's say something crazy happens, and the Titans at 7 have the choice between Neighbors, Odunze, and Alt, it would be very hard for me knowing that it would be very difficult to get that tackle in the second round to not take the left tackle. Because while, again, I'm sitting here saying, God, I love these receivers, and I love the philosophy that Brian Callahan has about the premium elite touchdown scorers over the premium elite non-touchdown scorers. I don't see a starting left tackle in free agency. So where do I get the left tackle? And it would be incredibly hypocritical of me with the amount of times that I have told you all the right tackle story to say, screw it at left tackle, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Go get some Scarbini, bring Dennis Daly back. But I want Roma Dunze. So what do? Jonah Williams is on the market. He might be the second best tackle available. They hated him so much in Cincinnati, they gave Orlando Brown Jr. $1 gazillion to play left tackle, moved him over to right tackle because he was such a liability at left tackle. You're going to put that guy at left tackle? So Fields' mock draft today, I saw Alt at 5, and I'm like, trust me, I've been hearing that too. Odunze at 7, yes, Roma Dunze to the Titans. But then where do I get the left tackle? If they're not going to be there in the second round, where do I get the left tackle? If they're not going to be there in free agency, where do I get the left tackle? And now you see the bind the Titans could put themselves in. Now, I think there is one way for the Titans to get themselves out of this. If a Joe Alt or whomever is not rated high, or if Alt's off the board and the other guys aren't rated high enough, I do think there is one way out of this, and this would be a Bill Callahan decision. Not even a Brian Callahan decision. I mean, ultimately, Brian Callahan and Rand Carthon would make this decision, but I would need to hear it from Bill's mouth. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company right here, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
I think Skoronski can be one of the best guards in the league. I think he would be a very good left tackle, but he's got more upside to be able to be a playmaker. As much as you can call an offensive lineman a playmaker at guard. If I were the Titans, I would leave him at guard. I would draft a left tackle. I would let those two guys develop side by side over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, and then try to re-sign them both. Because as you look at the best offensive lines in the league, and more importantly, as you look at offensive lines that went from being poor to good, in other words, great improvement, a lot of the time it's not because they added so much talent, but because they allowed continuity to develop. They kept the same 5 starters in place as much as they could over the course of several years, and they got better production out of the unit as a whole. And I think by drafting that left tackle and leaving Skoronski at left guard, they have a chance to do both things: upgrade the talent at left tackle, but then let those guys develop together as a two-man unit as they fill out the rest of the offensive line.
That was Trevor yesterday on our show. And so his theory is Skoronski can be one of the best guards in the NFL, or he can be a very good tackle. The rest of that was all the justification for why to keep Skoronski at guard, which I think the Titans want to do. And as much as I hate picking a guard with the 11th overall pick, I do think that, a great tackle and Peter at guard and Bill Callahan coaching him, that, I can get excited about. That could be something. But going back to Field Yates' mock draft, Roma Dunze to the Titans at 7 because Joe Alt's off the board at 5. Well, I don't think Alu Fashanu is worth the 7th pick in the draft, at least not where they rank him now. I mean, now they're saying he's like 18th or 14th or something like that. Well, you can't take the 14th best player in the draft with the 7th overall pick, because 2 things are going to happen. One, you're going to have the 18th best player, and everybody else that you're going to play against is going to have better players, including Roma Dunze, who you'll then have to play against. But secondly, the thing that could really happen and could really hurt you is you end up paying for that down the road by taking a guy with a premium pick that you didn't think was that good, and then he turns out to be not that good. Like, that is a fear. So here's, again, what I want to know. Going back to Skoronski. If Bill Callahan has the same opinion as Trevor, and there's no guarantee that he does, but if Bill Callahan has the same opinion as Trevor, that Peter Skoronski can be a great guard or a good tackle, I move Peter to tackle. Because then, and you don't have to make this decision until after the draft. Because I'm going to sign a swing tackle anyways. I mean, I'm not sold at right tackle, where they've got Nicholas Petit-Frere and Dylan Radins. And the thing I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep Dylan Radins and Nicholas Petit-Frere from starting next year. But if I do sign Jonah Williams, who played right tackle for the Bengals last year, if I sign Jonah Williams and then I draft Roma Dunze, I can move Skoronski over to left tackle, Jonah Williams to right tackle, and I can go sign a guard in free agency. Now, this is the hard part, is that free agency is before the draft. But here's why the ability to move Peter to left tackle is so important. Because if you do move him, and he can be a good left tackle, and a good left tackle today makes $20 million, right? I mean, we're not talking Trent Williams or Laramie Tunsil or one of the, we're talking a good, solid left tackle. Well, I can't get a good, solid left tackle in this year's free agent class. I can't at guard. Because at guard right now, Kevin Dotson of the Rams is a free agent. Robert Hunt of the Dolphins is a free agent. Kevin Zeitler and John Simpson from the Ravens, who play guard, free agents. I can sign a free agent guard. I can't sign a free agent starting tackle. I can sign a free agent guard and stick them at left guard and Skoronski at left tackle, if Bill Callahan thinks he can do it. Now, if Bill Callahan looks at the tape and says, I think Peter is just a guard, I do not think Peter has the length or, his feet are big enough or fast enough in order for him to play left tackle, to be able to deal with these edge rushers, if that's the case, cool. then he stays at guard, and we have to bring our heads together to figure out this left tackle position one way or another. But there are free agent guards that are out there. And that's why I need to know from my offensive line guru, I need to know what's available in free agent, or what do you think of Skoronski, so that I can then match that with what's available in free agency. So if I get stuck in a position with the 7th pick where a dynamic, game-changing receiver is on the board, I don't say, oh, crap, I can't take Roma Dunze because I got to take a left tackle, and so Olu Fashanu might be there. So call up whoever's got the 10th pick, and let's try to make a deal. I don't want to do that, and I need a tackle. I'm not smart enough to be able to tell you guys what would be good at tackle or what would be good at guard or what would be, but Bill Callahan is. And that would solve a massive problem. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com at 615-737-1025 if you want to weigh in here. One texter says, move Skoronski to left tackle and Radens to guard. Now, look, I was impressed with Dylan Radens this year based off of what I thought of him. And again, this goes back to the Jarrett Stillman never changes his opinion. I actually thought Radens was the best offensive lineman on the team this year. I'm just saying. I know Pro Football Focus says it was Aaron Brewer, but a center who can't snap is not something I'm interested in. But I don't think Dylan Radens is a starter. I don't even think he's really a high-end backup. I think Dylan Radens is a good 7th lineman that can play guard and play tackle, but most importantly, we'd prefer him to sit on the bench, if that's okay. Steven says, why are we arguing over a first-round draft choice before free agency commences? Because, Steven, we need to know who's going to be available in free agency, which we don't technically know yet because there are going to be some teams that cut guys, and there's going to be guys who get franchised. So we don't know who's going to be there or who's not. But we have to know how the draft stacks before we can sit there and say, okay, this is what you need to do in free agency. The two things are tied directly to one another. It'd be much easier if the draft were first, and then you build out your team around free agency. But it's not. Texter says, the Titans should sign David Bakhtiari and pray that he stays healthy. How old is David Bakhtiari? And when's the last time David Bakhtiari played? And I'll just say 16 games because I'm pretty sure that he hasn't played 17 games in the 3 seasons that we've had 17 games. I don't think he's probably played all 17
It's been
one
bad.
time.
It's been bad, yeah. Ever since the 2019 season, he played 16, and then it's gone 12, 1, 11, 1.
No. I mean, that's not an option. That's like signing Andre Dillard and praying that he's good. Hope is not a strategy. So I'm not doing that. That's the easy way out. That's what I will call the get you fired way out, which is sign this guy who's injury prone, hype him up to say, oh no, this year we think his knee is healthy. Our doctors checked him out. Have him play 6 games this year, be stuck with Dennis Daly and Nicholas Petit-Frere at left tackle, and you're fired. Again, I know everybody gets mad every time that we talk about Rand, but if he puts a left tackle out there that can't stay healthy and was an injury risk coming in, and then all of a sudden they've got another revolving door over there at left tackle and the quarterback gets hurt again, you guys singing Rand's praises will not be doing so. One texter says, I'm not sure I can mentally take another season with the worst offensive line in the league. How do we expect Levis not to get hurt again? Maybe Bowers is the answer, blocking and catching. A tight end is not the answer to fixing the offensive line. The answer is deciding what you're going to do and putting your foot down when it comes to Skoronski and then I think the right guard position. Because when they go into free agency, I believe the Titans are going to have to fill the right tackle position. You could convince me that signing Chris Hubbard back could be okay at right tackle. I'm really not excited about it, but if you did it with the idea in mind that you would draft a tackle and then you get to the draft and the tackle is gone and you take the receiver, fine. But, I mean, the Titans are going to have to go spend it. I mean, they're going to have to buy a center. I think we all know that. And the Titans are probably going to have to buy a right guard and a right tackle. And they're going to have to pay for it. And then the question is left tackle, left guard. If you don't draft a left tackle, then did you sign a right tackle that you can move to left tackle and then you can fudge it at right guard and sign a guy after the draft that's still available? Or do you, have to sign a left guard in free agency for top of the market money like Robert Hunt and then move Peter there and go into the draft saying, hey, if we get Joe Alt, then we can move Peter to right tackle, or we can move Hunt to right guard and Peter stays at left guard, that kind of thing. One texter says the Titans like injured players anyways. That was the last general manager. By the way, again, not to go all in on the Rand criticism thing again, but someone, yesterday was like, oh, he never criticized John Robinson this way. I called him a cryptocurrency trader the day after they drafted Caleb Farley. If you don't get the negative connotations of that, then you do not understand criticism. Fitz will join us next here on the program. Stillman and Company, 102.5-106.3 The Game here on our show. Again, that's 615-737-1025. And maybe, just maybe, we'll give something away on the other side. Stillman and Company, 102.5-106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, I promised something that I'd give away. Let's go ahead and do that. Be caller 5 right now at 615-737-1025, and you'll win a pair of tickets before you can buy them to see Dierks Bentley at Bridgestone Arena on Saturday, September 7th. Tickets go on sale Friday at 10 a.m. I was shocked today when I saw that the 49ers fired Steve Wilks. Now, I'm not somebody who sits there and grades the tape of San Francisco 49er defense, but I didn't think the defense was all that bad the other night. Jason Fitz now joins us on the program, Yahoo Sports, Fox Sports Radio. Fitz, what's the reaction to the Steve Wilks firing? Why'd it happen?
A lot of surprise. You're right about that, but I think it comes down to a couple of things. It's the first sort of outside hire for Shanahan at defensive coordinator, and I'm not sure the personalities necessarily meshed the right way throughout the course of the season. I thought the Super Bowl defense was fine. But the games leading up, the couple of playoff games leading up, the defense was definitely not what we expect from that standard. So you got to wonder, though, like honestly, and we all know this, that you're late to the hiring cycle. So I just keep looking around thinking, unless you already know who's taking that job, like Brandon Staley or somebody like that, unless you already have familiarity with who you're bringing in, I cannot imagine why you would make that move this late in the cycle unless you either know who you're bringing in or you know who from staff is going to take that job. Because otherwise, you're picking off the scrap heap, and that's less than ideal.
Fitz, I am incredibly down on Kyle Shanahan, who I thought was the best coach in the NFL. I am incredibly down on Kyle Shanahan after the Super Bowl. It was almost as if the way that he coached this Super Bowl opened the scabs of the previous Super Bowls, including when he was offensive coordinator in Atlanta and including the NFC title game against the Rams a couple of years ago. It seems to me, now, I know Mahomes is great, and I'm not taking anything away from him. And I know Andy Reid is good, and I'm not taking anything away from him. But it seems to me like Kyle Shanahan cannot close the deal, regardless of if it's Matt Ryan, Jimmy Garoppolo, or Brock Purdy at quarterback. Are you as down on Shanahan as I am?
No. And, honestly, I mean, look back at this game in my mind, and what do you have? Like, Shanahan was unusually aggressive a couple of times in ways that worked out. We're not used to seeing that. I thought Shanahan, it's not his fault that the ball takes a weird bounce off of somebody's foot and turns into, the punt opportunity. Obviously, it's not his fault. Like the 49ers offensive linemen were throwing each other under the bus on X about who missed the block in overtime, but that's not Shanahan. Like, at some point, players have to execute what's in front of them. So I think there were several players that sort of shrunk in the moment. It's not Shanahan's fault. Kicker misses an extra point. So, I think there's a lot of little blame to go around. But honestly, I didn't have a problem with Shanahan in this game.
You didn't have a problem with Christian McCaffrey ripping off 5 yards on first down at the end of regulation, and then him trying to run some little cute RPO against a blitz with Brock Purdy getting the ball to George Kittle matched up against Trent McDuffie when they could have just run the ball with McCaffrey because I thought the Chiefs defense was so gassed they couldn't stop it.
Yeah, you're right that he had run the ball well then. But up until that point, it was the lowest yards per carry that McCaffrey had in the entire season in the game that Trent Williams played in. So, for the most part, yeah, he run that 5-yard run. But for the most part, the Chiefs' defense was absolutely stout, was shutting down McCaffrey at every point. And then also go back like they showed today, the clip, of the play at the end of the game where you can hear McCaffrey saying to Brock, you can hear Kyle saying to Brock, McCaffrey, and he just doesn't throw the ball there, So I think that we're not privy to where that ball should have gone, but certainly Kyle Shanahan sitting there on the sideline saying McCaffrey's name over and over again, and then Brock throwing it somewhere else. It's just yet another reminder that execution matters in these situations.
You don't think Shanahan was stupid for taking the ball first?
I would have taken the ball first. I still would.
What?
I would absolutely take the ball first.
What? Why? That's ridiculous.
Before I heard his explanation, I tweeted it out at that point. I have no problem playing for third possession. I hadn't heard Shanahan say that, obviously, because it was still happening fresh in the game. But the couple of things that I would say here is that, number one, the analytics show it's about 50-50 on whether or not you get the ball first or second.
How would analytics know that? We've never had this before.
Because probability doesn't require pass. We all know that. It's the way they make probability on anything. But the other part of it is, through all of it, like, if I get the ball first, my defense is gassed after a long drive. My defense has given up one touchdown on a short drive throughout the course of the game. All I got to do is score points, and then I can trust my defense to make something happen there. I got no problem with that. And even the Chiefs saying that they would have gone for 2 at the end of it, that's fine, but how would Shanahan have known that, considering the Kansas City Chiefs went for absolutely 0 2-point conversions throughout the course of this entire season? So how would anyone have even presumed that was coming? So what I don't want to do when I'm taking on Patrick Mahomes, I don't want to put myself in a situation where sudden death ever goes to Patrick Mahomes first. And that's a real situation. Like the minute they got that field goal, all they had to do was hold him to a field goal, which they've done every drive but one throughout the entire course of the game. And if they do that, the ball's back in their hands for sudden death. I have no problem with it. I still don't have a problem with it.
So you think Kyle Shanahan's completely blameless and that this screw up in the Super Bowl this year, this loss in the Super Bowl, has nothing to do and is in no way, representative of the Atlanta screw up and the first Super Bowl and the NFC Championship game against the Rams? Because my thought on this, Fitz, is yes, if Matt Ryan doesn't fumble the football, or if Julian Edelman doesn't make that great catch, or if Jimmy Garoppolo hits Emmanuel Sanders, or if Jaquiski Tartt doesn't drop the Matthew Stafford interception, or if the ball doesn't hit off the guy's foot, or if Jake Moody makes an extra point, then Kyle Shanahan wins all of those games. But the one constant in all of that is Shanahan.
Yeah, that's like, this is correlation versus causation all day long. What do those things have to, like, if Kyle Shanahan, I think he could have run the ball more in the second half, which we've heard before in life. We're all used to hearing that. I think he could have tried to run the ball more. I think that's fair. But I also think that the Chiefs were absolutely shutting down the run game. So I'm not sure how you run, like, okay, we're going to run the ball, and then we're going to have 2nd and 8 and 3rd and 7. Then we're in negative down and distance. All of a sudden we got to hold up against Chris Jones, who's having the game of his life there. Like, there are some elements of this of, like, what do you want Kyle Shanahan to do? They were ahead in overtime with the lead in the Super Bowl. Like, am I going to sit here and say, my God, that it's Kyle Shanahan's fault that they lost the game, that they were ahead in overtime with the Super Bowl? Like, there are so many variables to winning and losing a football game. I'm not going to put that on the coach. Again, the very basic, if their kicker makes an extra point, a field goal doesn't tie the game at the end. And all of a sudden, we're in a situation where the Chiefs got to get a touchdown to win the game, which they may have been able to do. Who knows? But there's so many choose-your-own-adventure pauses on here. Like, they were in this game throughout the course of it. It was a great football game. I don't think when a team loses a great football game that there has to be somebody that is suddenly the villain that's at fault, that's stupid because they just lost the game. Like, I don't know what you want Kyle Shanahan to do in that situation. Like, it's not his job to block Chris Jones. Like, it's not the call was the right call. The offensive line has flat out admitted that they didn't execute the call they were given. That's like, what do you want him to do there? Like, that's at some point, Brock Purdy's got to understand.
I want him to hand the ball to McCaffrey. He's ripped off 5 yards on first down. The Chiefs' defense is sucking wind. They are a first down away from Kansas City basically not allowing, where Moody is kicking with the game ending. Like, that's the only way they could have won that game, is for Jake Moody to have gone out there, and when the ball goes through the upright, Patrick Mahomes doesn't have any time. That's the only way they could have won. And instead, he tries to run an RPO against a blitz.
Yeah, again, Christian McCaffrey was having the worst game of the year running the football. You presume that he hands off and everything is going to go golden. What if it doesn't? I didn't love the play call at the 2-minute warning. I didn't love that at all. But at the end of the day, even if I don't love that play call, that's the way that always works. Like,
who's the best player? Who's the best player on the 49ers?
McCaffrey, the very person that Kyle Shanahan was screaming on the sideline to get the ball to on that play. Like, the very person on the Texas route that looks like he's wide open. It was just Purdy missed him. Quarterback missed him. And how often have we seen in that situation when somebody decides to be aggressive and they end the game with a long pass and all of a sudden we're like, oh, you love that aggressive play call. Like, it wasn't even a long pass. It was just the play call that he wanted to make there wasn't executed well. McCaffrey was open. Like, again, this is like inside whatever that show is now that's on the CW, like Inside the NFL, whatever it's called. Like, they got the footage of him standing there saying, like, McCaffrey. Like, what else you want him to do? His quarterback didn't throw it there. It's just a mistake by the quarterback.
Hey, man, you know the old rule. Either you're coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. And in these 4 games, Kyle Shanahan has allowed it to happen. And I love Shanahan.
Isn't that the exact same thing we said about Andy Reid? In Philadelphia, we said the exact Andy Reid.
Andy Reid was the greatest loser of our time before Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, again. And now all of a sudden he's a Hall of Fame coach that might be one of the best ever?
Yes.
Because he got a quarterback?
Yes.
He didn't get better at his job. He got players that are better capable of executing what they need to in front of him.
And I'll be honest with you, I didn't think Andy Reid
couldn't do it.
I didn't think Andy Reid coached a good game on Sunday. I don't. I thought there were too many times. First of all, I thought the burning the timeout and not challenging the spot at the beginning of the third quarter was freaking stupid. Okay, if you're not going to challenge it, I get it. But if you're going to burn the timeout, you got to challenge that spot.
Yeah,
I thought that was a terrible call. I thought that there were too many drives where he killed the drive by handing the ball to Pacheco, who was getting nothing because their offensive line was being dominated by San Francisco's defensive line. And I thought there were far too many times in that game that he took the ball out of Patrick's hands. And in big games like that, I am riding the horse that got me there. I am not losing the game. I thought he took Kelsey off the field too much. I am not losing the game with the ball out of Mahomes' hands. Just like if I'm San Francisco, I am not losing the game with the ball out of McCaffrey's hands. And we can sit there and say, well, he should have thrown the ball to McCaffrey. Well, Kyle Shanahan can design plays that end up with the ball in McCaffrey's hands one way or another, and you know that.
That's what he designed a play for McCaffrey. Like, I
hand the ball to McCaffrey.
McCaffrey averaged 3.6 yards to carry. Again, worst.
And you know what? It was 2nd down and 5, right?
Yeah.
3.6. Now what is it?
So
3rd down and 1.4, and Kansas City has to call timeout. So now I'm averaging 3.6, and it's 3rd down and 1.4. I am 1.4 yards away at this point from giving the ball to Christian McCaffrey to set up a game-winning field goal, and Mahomes never gets the ball again. I will take that.
Or the same offensive line that missed the absolute block in front of him, misses a block in front of him again, hammers him down behind the line of scrimmage, and now all of a sudden we're in 3rd and 9, 3rd and 8, and 3rd and 8 is an obvious passing down. You put yourself in a negative situation. Like, if the play is open and it doesn't get completed, then why are we sitting here saying that the play call was bad? If it's open and it doesn't get completed, the execution was bad. Like, the variable of the execution is just something you got to live with. But if the play's open and it doesn't get executed, that's not a coaching issue. That's a player issue. Like, that's a moment that the team is going to want to have back, whether it's Brock and his reads or whatever it is, whether it's the offensive line and whoever miscommunicated on the blitz, like, however that runs. If the play's open, that's not on the coach to me.
Oh, I mean, again, you do this 4 times in a row. I mean, look, I hated Jimmy Garoppolo more than anybody, but because I think Jimmy stinks. But you do this 4 times, at some point it's on you. And I put him at the table with Dan Reeves, the late Dan Reeves. I put him at the table with Dan Reeves. I put him at the table now with Marty Schottenheimer. I put him at the table with Marv Levy, the great losers of our time. And if Andy Reid's proven anything, it's that you can get up from that table, but it's very, very difficult. Last one for you, Fitz is with us. Do you think that we should all give up hope that Will Levis can be good enough to ever be able to compete in an AFC that is led by Patrick Mahomes in his prime?
I mean, if the metric is being able to compete with Patrick Mahomes, I just finished taping my Yahoo show. If the metric is got to compete with Patrick Mahomes, I don't think anybody's going to have any success over the next couple of years. The only metric to me right now is, you got to hope to get in the playoffs and then hope that you have one of those games where the ball bounces off of a Chiefs foot. Like, I think that's the way you beat them right now. It's like you just got to be in the right place, right time, and get lucky. So I don't think this is a Will Levis thing. I think it's an entire AFC thing. This year, the Chiefs had a offensive line at best. They had no number 1 wide receiver, and their quarterback had the highest salary cap number in the NFL. They won the Super Bowl. And by the way, according to DVOA, they played the toughest schedule ever to get to a Super Bowl in the playoffs, right? So they played the toughest stretch ever with the worst team they have, and they won the Super Bowl. So If the metric is I got to be better than Mahomes, I think then what we're saying right now is the metric is you got to be better than somebody that could end up being the greatest quarterback of all time. That ain't going to happen. So now what's the real question? It's just like going against Brady and Belichick during those peak years. You just got to get in the playoffs, and you got to hope that one of those games runs your way. And proximity is all you can hope for. But that's true whether you're the Bengals or the Bills or the Ravens, all these people that have great young quarterbacks that may never win a Super Bowl because they got to go through Mahomes. Like, there's a reason Tomlin only has one, right? You had to go through Brady. I just think that's the AFC for the next 10 years. It's going to be Patrick Mahomes' league, Patrick Mahomes' conference, and every other fan base is just going to be hoping that this is the year you get lucky and you
don't think the Bengals can be the Peyton Manning to Tom Brady?
I hope so. On our show today, that was the team that I picked, was the Bengals to be able to be that. I hope that they're able to do that. Burrow is at this point, whether we want to accept this or not, Burrow is kind of injury prone, so it makes me nervous that he's gotten hurt so many seasons in a row, whether it's related or not. He gets hurt, so that makes me nervous.
Bet you didn't say that to him at the Super Bowl last week.
No, I did not say that to him at the Super Bowl. I did not say he's injury prone. You are correct.
That would have given Joe Montana, who was doing the interview with Joe Burrow and you, that would have given Joe Montana the ability to sell him on some Flexall. I mean, you set Joe up perfectly right there. Fitz, appreciate you as always.
Appreciate you, brother. Have a great week.
Yep, Jason Fitz, the Kyle Shanahan apologist, which I was not prepared for. 615-737-1025. Speaking of Shanahan, yesterday he had his kind of end-of-the-season press conference before he scapegoated Steve Wilkes and fired him. But he had his end-of-the-season press conference, and, oh, boy. Talk about talking out of both sides of your mouth. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5-1063, The Game.
some of the players after the game said they did not know the new rules for overtime. And Brock just said that he kind of went to Brian right at the start of overtime for kind of a refresher of, okay, these are the rules, right? Was it important, do you think, for the players to know the new rule as it pertains to overtime in the playoffs?
Well, yeah, I mean, we did say, and we told everyone as we were waiting for the coin toss, hey, review everyone with them, make sure they're sure before we go out. So we asked the position coach to do that, but no, I didn't cover it in a meeting on the Super Bowl week. I don't think that changes anything. We did it with our analytics department. We decided that going into the playoffs. I think you guys know how I've explained how I make decisions with that stuff in the past. I take all the information I can get, especially ones I haven't been in, and our analytics felt that was the best way to go. But as you guys know, I don't always just go with that. I take into account what they say, what they think is right, and then I go off my gut in the heat of battle. And I knew what they felt going into it. And when I think about that during the moments I have to make the decision, I think the type of game it was did match what they felt was the best way to do. It did seem more like a field goal game. And our defense had been out there for a real long time right before that. So I didn't feel at all to override that at the time.
That was Kyle Shanahan, and you're right there. Yeah, our analytics department said that we should take the ball. And, but I also kind of made the decision in the moment. But so analytics, so good on the San Francisco media because they heard that talking out of both sides of the mouth. The analytics told me to do it, but in the moment I decided to do it. So they followed up on it. Here's what Kyle Shanahan said about, again, the coin toss decision that everybody on the planet except for Jason Fitz and Kyle Shanahan thought was ridiculous. Here's what he said.
The decision that was made during the week,
Well,
basically.
Yeah, analytic decisions are made on a piece of paper, so you can read that and understand math and what they think about going off that. But but I always make it in a heat of battle with that information. And if it was like the Super Bowl the year before, the one that seemed more like a shootout, I think I might have felt a little bit differently. But having that information going in and the way ours was going, I didn't feel differently. I felt accurate with what they had recommended.
Now, people always ask me, what would Floyd say? And I never know the answer to that. And it drives me crazy. And then when people get mad at me, they'll say, Floyd would be upset about. I'm like, the only thing that I know Floyd would be upset about is when they fired Haas, the equipment manager. That I know he would be upset about. Everything else, I don't know how he would have felt one way or another. But when I hear that answer from Shanahan about analytics but I also make the decisions in the heat of the moment, I hear one of two things. The first I hear is the ha 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 ha, right? Like he's trying to blame analytics. But then he's like, also doesn't want to look like he doesn't have any cojones. So he wants to say that I made the decision, but I also talked to analytics. And because, again, the analytics people that are, analytics said it must be true. They'll shut up now. But then everybody else who thinks that's stupid, now I got to appease them too. The other thing that I think about when it comes to the old man is he used to never criticize Rick Barnes for never calling timeout. And he used to say, you don't know how many meetings they had about when to call timeout and about when to do this and when to do that. I'm going to guess they probably had meetings over the last 2 years with the new overtime rules about what do we do if the game goes to overtime? But I don't know. It seems like the only ones they had were with the analytics department. And again, when the analytics department met and they sat down with Shanahan, did they take into account that they were going to give Patrick Mahomes the opportunity to match? See, here's what they did. They decided that in a game of blackjack, they didn't want to be the dealer. Well, guess what? That's stupid. That doesn't mean the dealer wins every time, but I'd rather let you bust first than me. Jared versus Joe. Could this show get any more lively today? We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Studios. It is 5 o'clock on a Wednesday, which means it's time for the greatest debate in Nashville sports history, though it may not even be the greatest debate today on the Stillman and Company show. And this would now be our third debate since Fitz decided to go all in on defending Kyle Shanahan. Caroline, how are you? Caroline, you might want to unmute yourself there.
How are you?
I'm outstanding. And, of course, Joe Rexroad, who already defamed me earlier today, is with us, as always, for the Jared versus Joe program. Without further ado, let's get right to it.
Jared Stillman versus Joe Rexroad. Now on Stillman and Company.
On ESPN
102.5 The Game.
Jared versus Joe is presented by Pella Windows and Doors of Nashville.
I do feel a little bit left out because I've heard there's been some debating away from the Jared versus Joe segment, and I want to be included. Save it for Wednesday at 5 o'clock.
You know what? I did not save enough for the game because I got into it with Fitz today and Paul, and so maybe I'm just as warmed up as I need to be.
All right, first question. Joe, you go first. Gentry has just wrote a column about how he thinks that Rand Carthon should be more available to the media and to the fans. Do you agree?
Absolutely. We've talked about that, and I thought it was a good column. I mean, some of the stuff about, vision, like I don't totally dismiss the idea of, you are ultimately like serving your coach and things like that. So there's some things you can't say. And I have some sympathy for Rand Carthon in terms of the presser he did have to do when Amy Adams-Strunk wouldn't have one. So, I'm not completely down on Rand or think that he's like shirked his responsibilities or is a total disaster. But yeah, he should be more accessible. If this is going to be a reset and this is the real collaboration, all this stuff, I understand what he was saying too about during the season. For the most part, that's when the coach is front facing. That's fine. But if you make a big move, then you should talk about it. You should talk about it. If like the Bayard trade was a perfect example. Something like that happens during the season, then he should talk to us about it. And yes, he should be responsive in general to media, not at media's beck and call. That's not what it's about. But you need to. Ultimately, informing media is informing fans, and yeah, like the occasional official Titans podcast is not enough.
So I went back to something that Floyd put together a presentation that he did for the Seattle Seahawks when he was applying for their general manager position and interviewing for that general manager position. Man, it sounds like a real job when I say applying. But in it, he had the list of responsibilities. Now, remember that the Seahawks, it was Pete Carroll in charge, and Floyd would have been kind of that number 2 guy. And so he had the roles defined for each position. And this was the head coach, which was the guy in charge of the franchise. And in a 21-point job description, one of them included must help to develop and maintain relationships with all key media members. If you run a franchise, that's your job. And I think what I read in Gentry's column was the frustration of the fact that Rand does truly the bare minimum of media requirements. The only time he talks is when it is required by the league. It is required by the league that the general manager talk before the start of the season. So he talked. It is required by the league that the general manager talk after the season, or quote unquote somebody in power has to talk after the season, which is why he talked the day that Vrabel got fired. If it's not required by the league, he doesn't do it. And I don't understand, why the Titans feel the need to only do state-run media, and I don't understand why they feel the need to never defend anything that happens, publicly, and then to spin out a narrative that's a 180 from the narrative that they were spinning out before. And so there must be a reason why Rand never does any media outside of the house organs. And I don't know what it is, but there's something the Titans might be holding back here. And if Rand's so great as they keep telling us all the time and the narratives keep becoming, then why are they trying to hide how great he is? Why doesn't he sit down and address these things?
Situation. I mean, I thought other than, like the scolding during the draft last year about this is a great, that was a little like, okay, come on, man. But like
that was minor
intro
league
presser,
on his part.
Sure, but go through the whole presser or his intro presser. He's fine. These pressers are fine.
So then why can't he do them now?
I don't have an answer. But I expect it to change, and it needs to change, and it doesn't have to be some constant thing. But yeah,
how can you expect it to change?
What do you mean? I mean,
it hasn't changed yet. I mean, think about this, right? And again, I don't, everybody, if you say something good about John Robinson while saying something bad about Rand Carthon, everybody gets mad. And I say you, I don't know if that's you, me. If I say something here, but let's just compare the two. At this point, John Robinson would have already have held 2 press conferences in the offseason. He would have held one after the season was over. And he didn't hold one the day after the season was over, but he would always hold one eventually after the season was over. And he would have held one at the Senior Bowl, which he would have gone to, which I don't care that Rand didn't go to. But Rand didn't even take questions at the Brian Callahan press conference, and he wasn't there today to take questions with the assistant coaches, whom he helped hire. I mean, again, he's going out of his way not to talk.
Yeah, well, first of all, the end of the season obviously was different this year, right? I mean, he did have a presser. It was about Vrabel being fired.
It was an unmitigated disaster.
I don't think that's accurate on John Robinson having a presser at the Senior Bowl. He would talk to people sometimes. You could grab him, but he didn't have like a presser. And I wouldn't have expected Rand to be. That would have today. People wanted to hear from the coordinators. I don't think Rand had to be a part of that. If it's about, I understand he's oversees the coaching staff. Doesn't mean he has to talk. Like this was a good day to have Brian Callahan and 2 coordinators talk. I don't. That's fine. But
so when's the day for Rand to talk?
Next time he's going to talk will be in Indy, and that's
mandated by the league.
Although some GMs don't go, so
yeah,
I guess
it is technically. I think it's technically not mandated by the league, but I think it is strongly encouraged by the league.
So he should talk, but not. But that's the thing in Indy. There's 2 things. There's the 15 minutes at the podium, and then he needs to get with all of us who show up and have just for the locals thing. So that would be a good step. And then after that, again, it's like just the obvious times. The obvious times and when something big happens. And if that's the case, then it's fine.
I just don't expect him to do anything that's not required by him. Like, I don't expect him to do the press conferences after free agency. Like, the Titans, I think we can all agree, are going to sign some free agents to some big money this year. And if they don't, holy crap, the fans are going to go crazy. But when they do sign those guys, say they sign somebody, they agree to terms on Monday, they sign them on Wednesday, and they'll have the press conference after the physical on Thursday, right? I expect Rand to talk at that. The general manager does usually talk at those things, but I bet he won't.
Well, I mean, he can't go on the Titans podcast and say that he's going to be more available to fans and that he should be more available to fans and then not.
Right, and again, I think that the thing is, it's like, and Vrabel got like this too. Sometimes he's like, "Yeah, I want to, answer the questions of the fans directly on our show," But it's like, but media availabilities and all that. That is how you talk to fans.
I remember last year the draft. Rand did the press conference by himself without Vrabel, and I ran into Vrabel like the next day. And I want to say that Rand's excuse was, oh, well, we have players in the building, and so Mike is, going through the workouts or the meetings or whatever. And I ran into Vrabel like maybe the next day, and I said, hey, where were you at the press conference? And Vrabel was like, oh, we felt that one voice would be better. And I was like, okay. Like, when the story isn't straight, that means, hey, he didn't want to do it. And I think we know that that's probably Vrabel's MO. We'll see how much Rand does. We'll see. I'm open-minded. Caroline, what's next?
All right, Jared, you go first. What will Derrick Henry get on the open market? What should Derrick Henry get on the open market?
So Pro Football Focus has a Derrick Henry contract, their market estimate or whatever, at 2 years, $10 million. Now, I don't know what the guarantee is, and that's the most important thing probably in this. But let's just say, if it's going to be $10 million, 6 is probably going to be guaranteed of it. I guess. That's the Pro Football Focus thing. And while I think Pro Football Focus is a little Looney Tune sometimes, I do think we have to all agree that, the analytics, people are using that stuff more and more, so maybe Pro Football Focus is more in line with reality than it used to be in the past. I think Derrick Henry is going to get a 1-year, $3 million guaranteed deal up to $7 million, and it'll be sold as up to $7 million. But I think that $3 million is the most any team will guarantee him on the market, and I think that might be too much, only because of all the running backs that are going to be in free agency this year, and Derrick's a 2-down back, and Derrick's 30, and the Super Bowl champions just had a 7th-round pick as their running back. So I think I might be going even higher than I should. I'll go 1 year, $3 million with incentives to up to whatever the hell you want to make it, but it's going to be $3 million guaranteed.
I said 4, and you said I was smoking crack.
You guys were talking about like multi-year deals and that these teams would jump for it, and I'm looking at $3 million.
I said 2 years maximum, but probably 1 year, $4 million.
Have you ever watched The Price is Right before?
Not really, but I know
what happens when you go over?
You lose.
There you go.
But you don't set the market, Jared.
I think I told you I think $3 million is too generous. Like I think I'm going too high there.
Back when Derrick Henry did the running back Zoom call and all this stuff, I wrote like a column about it, and I think at the time I wrote he's probably going to get someone's going to offer him like $4 million, and I don't feel that much different. I agree with the idea of lower than that with incentives to higher than that makes sense to me. The one thing is it does take one team, just one team, and so even if the market and most people agree with everything Jared said there. If there's one team that's enamored, it could be a little bit better than that. And I think that is possible. I've said it forever. I think the Baltimore Ravens, with what they do and with what he's still capable of doing, I think it would be an amazing fit. And I think that I think they should look at that and see him in their scheme as a fantastic complement to what the bind they already put defenses in. I mean, you cannot try to defend him the way teams defended the Titans in that scheme with that quarterback. But that's just one team I had in mind. If there's a particular team, maybe it goes over just because that's what happens, right? Free agency, even sometimes running backs get paid more than like the market dictates, but it's not going to be a lot. I mean, it's going to be right in that range. It's going to be, could you have a 2-year deal that's really a 1-year deal? Sure, right?
Up to.
What's up? Yeah, I mean, something like that. It's not going to be a lot, and I would think that he would not be surprised by that at this point. I mean, he has to understand it. He's determined to keep rolling through his 30s, and I'm not betting against him, but that doesn't mean that he can influence the market too much. I mean, it's going to be humbling.
I think that he is going to be shocked, to your point about humbling about what's out there, but I will say this: the Pro Football Focus numbers are actually in Henry's favor, which is saying something because I think teams care about that stuff a lot more than they used to nowadays. More Jared versus Joe to continue next. Stillman and Company, Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. There is no debate when it comes to who is the best. It is Hiller, and I know this because I've been using Hiller at my home for years and years. And it is Valentine's Day, and that means that love is in the air. So find your perfect match this month with Hiller. Get a free UV light when you purchase select new HVAC systems. Get a free whole home surge protection when you buy a new whole home generator. Or get 50% off a descaler when you buy a select new tankless water heater, and you'll never be more in love with your home. Find the perfect match today at happyhiller.com. I had Hiller at my house Monday. They did a fabulous job. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller! Call the Happy Face Truck today. Jared versus Joe is presented by Pella Windows and Doors of Nashville. Caroline, go.
Should the Titans be in on either the Justin Jefferson or the T. Higgins sweepstakes or both? And what would you be willing to give up to get one or the either? Joe, you go first.
Oh, boy, another one of these, what would you give up? Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, I don't even know. What are you giving up that's going to get you into those, you know? I mean, to answer your question, sure. I'm not both of them are fantastic players, so if it's a situation like T. Higgins, they're going to tag him, they're going to trade him, if that's what's going to happen, yeah. Sure.
So what would you give up?
Yeah, I mean, not a lot. Can I give up not a lot? Can that be my answer? How about a second-round pick? How about it? Sure. Then let's do that.
You're going to give up the 38th overall pick for T. Higgins and then sign him to a $100 million contract?
I might think about that. I mean, the thing is
a second-round pick not a lot?
I mean, the 38th pick in the draft, I think, is like probably a little too rich for Higgins, if I had to. Because you're also paying the contract.
I'll say this: if we're just talking about, let's say it's all things being equal, and it was comparing those two. I mean, I would definitely give that up for Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson is absolutely a great player on his own. There's no questions asked. He has demonstrated it. He has played with not a top 5 quarterback, and he has not had the kind of support on the other side of the field to skew the results at all. So he's easily a top 5 receiver, I believe, in the NFL. Higgins, I think is really good, and he's a number 1 receiver on a team, but I don't have that same level of certainty with him. So I would still consider a second-round pick for T. Higgins. I'm gladly giving that up for Justin Jefferson.
Well,
Would you give up a first for Justin Jefferson?
What's that?
Would you give up a first for Justin Jefferson?
Oh, God. There's again, it comes with, just like Jared said with T. Higgins, you're talking about also a massive financial investment. That's a really tough one. I'll say no.
Okay, so I did the math yesterday.
It's the 7th pick.
Yeah, so I did the math yesterday on the Jefferson front, and then I screwed it up because I thought Minnesota had the 12th pick and they had the 11th pick. So the numbers are off a little bit, but I'm sure they're not off as much as I would think. And to equal the Tyreek Hill trade that Miami and Kansas City pulled off 2 seasons ago, the Titans would have to swap picks from 7 to 11, deal their second-round pick at 38, plus their second next year or their third and their fourth next year. And there may have to be another pick that goes the way of Minnesota because, again, I thought they had the 12th pick and they actually have the 11th pick. But I sat down yesterday at my desk and I kind of did the trying to equal the points up. So let's just, for argument's sake, say that there's not that big of a difference between 11 and 12. So you swap to 11 plus a 2 this year at 38 plus a 2 next year. Then you have to give him a $32 million a year contract because Tyreek is the top at 30, and he's going to sign the richest contract in the history of the NFL. So you're looking at about $65 million guaranteed now on a 5-year deal or 4-year deal, 5 years, 4 extended, which is going to run you about $128 million. I mean, I don't want to cop out here and say, well, how do you have Neighbors and Odunze rated? Because if you have Neighbors and Odunze rated as the same or better than Jefferson, then you would be better off drafting the uninjured, cheaper player better than Jefferson. And I love Odunze and I love Neighbors, but, I mean, I've seen – who was that Lions receiver? Was it Charlie Rogers or Carlos?
Charles Rogers?
Charles Rogers. Yeah, I saw him go number 2 in the draft. So I'm like, at the same time, when it comes to these guys. So it's tough on the Jefferson front. You're basically giving up 2 players, a good player this year and a good player next year in order to get Justin Jefferson. I think I'd do it. I think I would because, again, you're not losing the first-round pick. You're swapping so you can still get your tackle. So I would do that. On the Higgins front, 38's too high. Like, in order to make this deal work, I think that I would have to move down in the second round to somewhere in like the 45 range and deal that, and then I have to give Higgins $100 million, and I don't think Cincinnati would take that. Because I think Cincinnati would value the ability to win with the player for the one extra year more than they would the 38th pick or the 45th pick or something like that. So I don't think they would do it either, and I am not getting into the first-round ballpark with Higgins, and I am not dealing my first-round pick next year for Higgins, which would be probably the compromise. Like, they want your first-round pick this year. You're not dealing the 7th. They probably would balk at your second-round pick this year, so the compromise would be your first-rounder next year, and I am not dealing that for T. Higgins. So I would say no on Higgins, because I think I could draft the next Higgins the way that Field Yates was talking about the wide receivers in this draft. I don't think I can necessarily draft the next Jefferson. So I'd swap out with Jefferson to get my tackle and get Jefferson, but I would not do it for Higgins. Do you have a problem with that, Joe?
I don't have a problem with that, no.
Because that's my thing with drafting the receiver in the first round. Because I'm not anti any position really for the most part, outside of like let's not be ridiculous. Like, I'm not drafting a long snapper in the first round. But if you take a Dunze or Neighbors, or if Marvin Harrison Jr. is there, if you take him, because you can say, okay, I want a younger, cheaper Justin Jefferson, then who's your left tackle?
Right. Yeah,
Okay,
if you can take care of this, if you can take care of that position and have yourself a young and proven Justin Jefferson, and then what you have clarity for the draft, and you can move around accordingly. That's a huge advantage.
My problem
there's no guarantee you're getting Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, my problem is when it comes to like the draft and the tackle and I hate drafting for need. And yet at the same time, there's a part of me that wonders, based off of what Field Yates said to me last week, which is that the teams that are good, that are going for it, need tackles. Like Cincinnati needs a tackle. San Francisco needs a tackle. Kansas City needs a tackle. So, yeah, it's easy to sit there and say, oh, okay, well, if I get a Dunze, then maybe because there's 8 or 9 tackles, they'll be available in the second round. And he doesn't think there will be. And so there's no real left tackle option for me in free agency. And it makes it, how many times have I told the right tackle story? The left tackle story is probably worse than the right tackle story. So it does make me nervous. Caroline, what's next?
And I get it. I'm anti-drafting for need as well, but I think that you can draft the best player available and also for need, because you have a need at pretty much every single position. All right, Jared, you go first. Is Kyle Shanahan a pants pooper?
Yes. He has joined the table. Andy Reid got up a couple of years ago when he beat Kyle Shanahan in that first Super Bowl from the greatest losers of our time table. He got up. Marty Schottenheimer is sitting at that table. May he rest in peace. Dan Reeves is sitting at that table. May he rest in peace. Marv Levy is sitting at that table. I would say North Turner, but he never won enough to ever be in that kind of discussion. That is the greatest losers of our timetable, and Kyle Shanahan has a seat right here at the table because Andy has gone to the winner's table. And I got to tell you, I love Shanahan. I think he's a great coach and all this stuff, but hey, you screw up with Matt Ryan, you screw up with Jimmy in the first Super Bowl, you screw up with Jimmy again, you screw up this one. At some point when all the players are different and the result is the same, the problem is you. And there's no way around it with Shanahan. And taking the ball in overtime was one of the stupidest things I've ever seen in the Super Bowl. So, yes, Shanahan.
God, calm down.
Thank you. Welcome to the table. Are you not putting him at the same table with Marty Schottenheimer?
So here's the thing, Jared. You just made all kinds of false equivalency. Tell me what Marv Levy, okay? You're talking the losers table or the pooper table? I want to know which one. Tell me what Marv Levy did. He got blown out every time, and then Scott Norwood went wide right.
They lost.
And if you want to go,
the greatest losers of our time, Marv Levy.
Okay. Poop his pants in any of those situations?
I mean,
screw it up.
Okay, as far as like the biggest choke artist, I mean, I guess he's not as big of a choke artist as Schottenheimer. Schottenheimer.
But even Schottenheimer. So you got Elway going 98 yards and the greatest drive ever, and you got Ernest Biner fumbling the winning.
And Brady in 2006.
Yeah, but here's the thing with Shanahan. He pooped his pants like no one. I mean, an all-timer in the 28-3. And I have to give it to him. He was the OC. He's calling the plays. That was simple math, and you win. That's it. He gave that Super Bowl to Tom Brady. So that is pooping your pants. Now, the last one, Jimmy G hits an easy pass, and they win. Am I right? That's over. And in this one, look, I would have preferred to take – I mean, ultimately, given all the information, I would have done the other thing. But to act like it's some insanely stupid thing to do what he did, the analytics tells you 65% you are winning if you get to the third thing.
Where'd you get to that? Where'd you get to those analytics? Because one, that's never happened before, so I don't know how the analytics can come up with that. And two, more importantly, the analytics I hear are 50-50, and now you're telling me 65% with your analytics?
Yes, 50-50 going in. What I'm saying is 65% if you get to the third possession, right? So if you get it to the match, whether it's you both don't score, you both score a field goal, you both score a touchdown, then you get the ball in sudden death. It's the old overtime rules. Like, I get it. Plus your defense was gassed, even though he said that wasn't a factor, but it would have been for me. I just watched my defense. They're gasping for air. They just got scored on and out. Let's go right back out there. It wasn't some incredibly stupid thing. I would have done the other thing, but to me, he has pooped his pants once very badly. The other two, he lost. And look, if
you don't blame him blowing an 11-point lead in the NFC Championship game, you don't blame that on him.
I'm talking about the two Super Bowls. I'm talking about the two Super Bowls before this. The two Super Bowls. Jimmy G misses a pass, or they beat the Chiefs the first time. Super Bowl. And then before that, when he was OC of the Falcons, that is pooping your pants. If you're just putting him at a loser's table, fine. Of course, sure. If you're going to be the coach and lose these games, you're at the loser's table. But even in that situation, as I just pointed out, Mark Levy didn't poop his pants. His freaking field goal kicker kicks one, and there's one ring, and the other time they had no chance. They were completely outclassed by Washington
get blown
and
out
Dallas
by the Cowboys. Yeah, I mean, they did get blown out there. So, again, to Caroline's point, yeah, I mean, like, Kyle Shanahan, here's the thing. Kyle Shanahan technically can skirt the blame for 28-3 because he was the offensive coordinator, not the head coach. But then when you do what has happened to him since then, it brings it back. It's like expunging something from the record. And then it's like, nope, unseal those documents, Judge. And that's how I feel about Shanahan. And I agree with you, right? We can make the argument that if Matt Ryan doesn't fumble the ball, or Julian Edelman doesn't make that incredible catch, or if Jimmy G hits Emmanuel Sanders,
all
or
he
if
had to do was run it. All he had to do was run the ball.
If Jaqueski Tart catches the interception that Matthew Stafford threw right in his hands, because I do count Shanahan as choking that game, or if, in this case, if Jake Moody makes an extra point, we can do that for every single one of his losses. I almost think we can do that for every single coach for every game that is remotely close. Is we can say, oh, if this guy had just caught that ball, if this guy had not fumbled that ball, if that ball had not hit the guy's foot, and it just had the one constant in all of this, Joe, is Shanahan.
Again, you're now making too many excuses for him. He pooped his pants in the first Super Bowl because he called the plays. Pete Carroll, when he gave Brady another gifted Super Bowl that Brady's had, when the all-time worst coaching decision of all time to throw on first down, that is pooping your pants.
Yeah, but he's got a championship, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
Are we talking about pooping
pants or not? So if you've ever won, and all the other transgressions are just forgiven, they don't count?
Yes, it's called the Bobby Cox rule.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Because we don't consider Bobby Cox one of the greatest losers. And boy, did Bobby Cox lose a lot, but he got the one.
Andy Reid.
Andy Reid lost a lot, boy. Mariota throwing touchdown passes to himself. Caroline, who wins this week?
Andy Reid counts in there, too, because his clock management was part of it. So it wasn't just like circumstance.
You talking about that Super Bowl?
Yes.
Oh, that was terrible. Caroline, who wins this week?
I do think that Kyle Shanahan pooped his pants by receiving in overtime. Like that, I think that is so dumb. I think that is so dumb. You give Patrick Mahomes control. Like, are you crazy? Are you a crazy person? But I have a hard time labeling Kyle Shanahan as this massive pants pooper loser, even though he has gone 0-3 in the Super Bowl. Because who has he lost to? Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes twice.
Well, that's Stafford, though.
Those are two of the best, if not the two best quarterbacks in the history of the National Football League. Like, I mean, a lot of people are doing a lot of losing to Patrick Mahomes and to Tom Brady.
You want to be the man?
You got to beat the man.
I'm just saying.
But there is a really big difference between being the man and being a habitual pants pooper. So Joe wins. Also because of your dramatic Derrick Henry market comments. I mean, my goodness. I'm smoking crack for 1 year, $4 million.
More
and you are
importantly,
justified for 1 year, 3.
You can give me the Brady Mahomes talk all you want. That's fine. You can't let him off the hook for the Stafford game because Stafford ain't that good.
That's fair.
So that's all
I'm just talking about Super Bowls.
Let the record show. Well, I mean, that NFC title game, an 11-point lead in the fourth quarter is pretty bad.
Is Aaron Rodgers a pants pooper because he loses in the NFC Championship game all the time?
Well, he did win his one when he was young.
That does not erase poop stains in his underwear.
I mean, he does poop. Guys, thank you so much. Jared versus Joe is presented by Pella Windows and Doors of Nashville, 615-737-1025. We roll along. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106 The Game.
You've been with the Ravens most recently.
Mm-hmm.
Their philosophy always seemed to have a knack for finding the football, creating turnovers. What's your philosophy regarding trying to get the football?
It's not going to change. You know, we understand this. The ball travels further and faster in the air than it does the ground. So we have to play outstanding pass defense. We got to keep the ball in front of us. But within doing that, we have to attack the ball with violence. All right, the way you get takeaways in this game is population and technique. All right, and the manner in which you play. So the same philosophies they have in terms of the Ravens defense, it's going to be the same philosophy I carry. It's been the same philosophy of all the guys that you mentioned before that I work with.
That was Denard Wilson, the Titans' new defensive coordinator. Look, an opening press conference is an opening press conference. And I don't know, if it tells you anything or not or whatever. But I did like his opening press conference. But, Ian, I got to be honest.
Okay.
When I saw Steve Wilks got fired today by the 49ers.
Yeah, a little buyer's remorse maybe.
Well, I went into today, when Denard Wilson got hired, initially I was like, well, I'd kind of rather have an experienced, older defensive guy that you farm the ball out to and say, hey, defense is yours, and I'm a coach offense, which is kind of what I wanted. Then they hired kind of the young, up-and-coming guy, and I just don't know if you farm the ball out to the young, up-and-coming guy. But he is a hot name people are really excited about. And I certainly thought he, had some real substance today at the press conference. So I was feeling good about it. Then I saw that Kyle Shanahan threw Steve Wilks under the bus today after they allowed 17.5 points a game and held Mahomes to 19 points in regulation of the Super Bowl? And I'm like, oh no, Steve Wilks, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's the guy. Farm the ball out to that guy. It'll be okay. But, man, that's the kind of guy I'm looking for. Like Steve Wilks. And I got to say this. I've never met Steve Wilks, so he might be a horrible person. I don't know. But he keeps getting crapped on. He takes the Arizona job, and 1 year with Josh Rosen at quarterback, he gets fired. Last year, he got elevated in Carolina, and I thought he did a really good job and turned that season around, and they got rid of him for Frank Reich. And now, after allowing 19 points in regulation to Mahomes, they just chuck him out the window in San Francisco. I feel bad for Steve Wilks. 615-737-1025, Stillman and Company. Let's talk about White Bison. That's right. But hey, I don't want anybody to think that doesn't mean that I don't like Denard Wilson, because I like him fine. Steve Wilks. By the way, I do want to set the record straight. Apparently, John Robinson, I said earlier that Rand Carthon, that John Robinson would do a end of the season pre-everything press conference. That was sporadic at best. And I said that he would do a press conference when they introduced the players who were signed. That is not the case. So I do owe Rand Carthon an apology on that. 615-737-1025. Let's talk about White Bison. Stay warm and cozy with their new honey-based drinks, the Cinnamon Beet Hive Latte, the Iced Honey Nut Macchiato, the Vanilla Rooibos Tea Latte, and more. White Bison is your local coffee shop with food featuring fresh-made premium breakfast, lunch, and snack options. Download the app and order ahead. When you download the Twice Daily and White Bison app, you can enroll in the rewards program that allows you to place orders on the go anytime and automatically earn on every single purchase. Download the app to order ahead, earn rewards, and get one free coffee every time you buy 7. Part of White Bison's rewards. Buy 7, get one free. White Bison, Twice Daily, fresh all day. Stillman and Company, we've been following all day the tragic story at the Chiefs Super Bowl parade. 3 suspects have been taken into custody, a mass shooting, 1 dead, 22 injured, 3 are currently in critical condition. And the thing I respect about you all, the audience, with this show is that we really try to avoid the hard stuff, right? Like this is sports, man. And that's why, again, like when somebody doesn't like me because of a sports opinion, I just kind of sit back and whatever. It's sports, right? That's why I'm never going to be like, and I got nothing against Clay Travis, but I'm never going to be Clay Travis. I'm never going to get into politics. I'm never going to sit there and now all of a sudden have takes about abortion or taxes or anything like that. And I respect you all enough to know that on your time, which is what I am working on, that you guys don't come here to be lectured about gun violence and the Chiefs Super Bowl parade and stuff like that. You want more of me yelling at Joe and me and Paul yelling at each other, and I respect that. But I will say this. Can't go to the Super Bowl parade now. Like, that's where we are with all of this, with all the gun violence and everything else. And if you want to hear me talk for the next 60 seconds and you want to say, I will never listen to your show again, that's fine. You can do whatever you want. I'm not going to blame you. I hope you would know that, again, we don't do a lot of this, but I just kind of feel like now it's at a point where you're almost lucky to go through life if you don't get shot because so many people are getting shot on a consistent basis, and then all we ever do is yell at each other about all the shooting. We don't ever do anything about it. It's like I see all these people on Twitter. When are we going to do something about it? You know the answer to that. So I don't know what the next step is in staying safe. But I think about wanting there to be a parade on Broadway one day. Is it possible for them to protect everybody if there's going to be 1 million people out there? And I don't know the answers to that. But I don't want to get shot. Now, I don't know about you guys, but it's harder and harder to think about, man, where can I really feel safe? And so it's a heartbreaking story again. And I just don't know what the next step is other than people yelling at each other. So we'll be thinking about the people in Kansas City today. A horrific event. And as painful as it is of the one person that passed away, hopefully it stays at 1. And that's all we can hope for at this point. That's it for us. Preds Insiders next. Stillman and Company. See you tomorrow, too.